Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast. This is Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me, as usual, are fellow Sevastopol survivors.
Adam Zeller, aka RidgeTop.
Greg, also known as Still Collating.
And we are joined by two guests for this episode, making her fourth appearance.
Maybe? Yeah.
Returning again for a currently unknown number of times is...
Natasha, also known as SizzyBubbles.
And we have one final guest, breaking my rule of 4 that I always used to have in the past, but now needs to be enforced for technical reasons, which I'll explain to Adam later, because he missed all that part of the convo before we started. But when we decided we were doing a retrospective on Alien Isolation, I knew I wanted to get this chap on because of the work he's done in giving it its afterlife within the fandom. A game that wasn't intended to be moddable, but this man made it happen. If you've got any presence online, if you've seen any of the various PC gamer news articles on him, it is Mr. Matt Filer. Welcome, Matt.
Hello, hi, nice to be here. Matt Filer, also known as Matt Filer. No alternate names.
Yeah, that is just your handle on Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah, easy to remember.
There you go. And before we start talking Alien Isolation, though, Matt, could you just do the typical thing that all us Alien and Predator and franchise podcasts do, and just tell us a little bit about how you got involved or how you encountered the Alien franchise and what led to this position as the definitive Alien Isolation modder, man.
Yeah, I mean, Alien was a film my dad showed me when I was like super young. It was one of the first sort of films I grew a sort of interest in. And yeah, I remember the first time he showed it to me. We sat down and watched it one evening and like popcorn and at home, and it was this sort of weird experience. He was like, "This was my favorite film when I was a child." And he showed it to me, and will always remember it. So I was just like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" Like the fact that this was achieved so long ago. Um, and it kind of grew my love of films and filmmaking, and it was the thing I really wanted to do, like through school and going into college, and filmmaking was like my thing. And then Alienization came out, and I was not like a gamer, but I bought it because obviously having a love of the film, and it just sort of opened my eyes to how cool games can be. Like, because there's this sort of like experience that you're in control of, which is obviously Alien Isolation is so accurate to the film. It's like literally being in your own film that you can sort of control and walk around in. And I was just like, this is so cool. So yeah, I then cancelled the course I was going to do at college for filmmaking and went on to do a computing course and then went on to do a games course and then now build games based on this sort of love of and transition between films to games of from Alien, which is quite a cool little roadmap I've gone through. But yeah, I have a lot of to thank for the film and then obviously the game and everything. Sort of this interest of digging into the game's files and then figuring out all of this stuff about the alternate stories and things and all this sort of mystery that sort of unraveled of just poking about in the files and figuring out things and reverse engineering things and breaking things. And it's just this sort of 10-year journey, and then obviously however many other years with the film. It's yeah, it's just shaped a lot of the things and the decisions I've made, which has been quite cool.
And you're in the profession now, aren't you? You are making games for a living.
Yeah, so I work making things in Unity for like VR games and stuff. Yeah, looking to sort of expand my horizons at the moment, so I'm looking around other places. But yeah, games is my thing.
Cool.
And if I'm not mistaken, you also did a Colonial Marines mod, did you not? Like an overhaul for that?
Yeah, so I helped out. I didn't build that. I helped with sort of the promotion side of that one because yeah, obviously being more into filmmaking at that time, it was before I got really deep into the modding stuff. It was I'm blanking on the guy's name now. Terrible. But yeah, the Clone Marines overhaul was like this big mod.
Was
That
it
sort of,
Templar?
Templar GFX, yes. Yeah, he yeah sort of fixed a bunch of the problems with the AI. It was like the classic thing of they named something wrong and that was why part of it wasn't working properly and
No.
all this sort of stuff.
It
And
was
he did the
Tether.
yes, yeah, and then he did the awesome all the work for upgrading the visuals as well. And I built some of the promotional stuff for that and did all the like ModDB sort of management, which is a nice sort of getting into doing modding from a sort of transition period before I was sort of too technical, I guess.
That's cool, especially in an age where games aren't known as being modder friendly nowadays. It's not like the olden days where that was your avenue into gaming. But for you, it obviously did work out that way in the end, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think games are sort of starting to change that now. I mean, there's a lot of games you see recently where it's like, oh, we've heard the players were going to release mod tools, which is nice. I think it'd be cool if more games start doing that. I think a lot of games are now starting to move towards like Unreal and stuff. Obviously, sequel to Isolation has been built in Unreal 5. So obviously everything using the same engine base is obviously going to be more mod tools and stuff. Which I think is great because you get like me, for example, it gets people into building games and things, being able to poke about and sort of modify things. And yeah, the Isolation obviously a custom engine, which is why there were no mod tools put out for it. So reverse engineering that has been great fun. But Colonial Marines Unreal, obviously is Unreal 3, I think that was.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, cool. Thank you for that, Matt. So, as this episode is a 10th anniversary sort of look back, and that makes me fucking sad again to think that it's been 10 years since this game first came out and I sat there playing it one morning. I hate feeling old, guys. But that's a tangent. Anyway, as we do on these things, I'd like to just sort of look at our original thoughts at the time and go back to how we feel about it now. And sort of like the relationship with coming into Isolation, because this was in a we're in a time where we get lots of conventions and events, and there's preview events for Isolation and stuff like that. So whether it's things you got to explore, if any of you guys got to go to the events in the States, I genuinely cannot remember if you pair were at any of those things, directing that at Adam and Sizzy. So I'm curious to hear about people's sort of journey with Isolation and just how it's changed over the last 10 years at all, if it has changed. Zala, you go first.
Well, no, we didn't do any events at the time because that was a year after I really joined the podcast and came on staff. So maybe I wasn't quite ready for that. But
Yeah, but didn't you ever go to conventions and stuff just off your own back as a?
I mean, mostly just local conventions here in Utah. It wasn't really until 2017 that I went to E3 for my first time.
Well, that was
And
your first gaming event.
big gaming event. Yeah, I would say
Okay.
so. And I did that for 3 years, and that was fantastic. And then Comic-Con more recently, but I digress. So Alien Isolation, when it came out, I loved it. I feel like most of us did on the site. I played the hell out of it for months at the time, and I could already tell this was going to be like an important game in the Alien series. As someone who's always loved survival horror games, I'm a big fan of the Resident Evil games, as you know, Aaron. Um, it was really cool to see what I had always wanted for the Alien franchise being brought to such a high production game for Isolation in terms of just being a pure survival horror experience. Now, going back, and I'm sure if I listened to our review I did at the time, I had some issues with the game. Like, as much as we love it and as much praise as we give it, it wasn't perfect and it did have a few shortcomings for me. Over time, those have kind of faded for me, honestly. And I feel like my opinion of the game has only increased over time. So I still love it. I replayed it again recently for this podcast, and it was great. And I've played all the difficulty levels except for super easy. Maybe I will try super easy and see how that goes. I've gotten all the achievements for the game, so I have played the hell out of Alien Isolation, and I'm still not sick of it. And I think that says something for just the quality of the game and the passion and dedication of the people who made it. I think it's been a very important staple in not only the Alien fandom and franchise, but also video games and horror in particular. So yeah, I feel like it's one of the most, if not the most important video games we've had in these franchises. So yeah, and it's always a joy to revisit, and it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since October 2014. Yeah, I'm getting those thoughts about getting old too, Aaron. But no, I mean it's always a joy to revisit, and I remember revisiting it with the mobile games, which I'm sure we'll get to a bit later. But that was also a really cool experience just to see how well the game did on this other hardware.
Greg, how about yourself?
Well, my experience with the game, just a little bit of context. So I come from the legacy of the PC AVP games. I'm generally a PC gamer. I don't generally have or use the other consoles, but I was used to the AVP games. I loved the ability to have single player and multiplayer, and was accustomed to, when you're playing as a human, you're playing from a colonial marine perspective that had a lot of horror elements in them, especially with games like AVP2 and AVP 2010. And then when ACM, Aliens Colonial Marines, first came along, then yeah, you noticed the shift where the horror was less intense there, and we all had that, and that there was that level with the boilers in that sewer where a lot of people were praising it, like, "Ooh, that's an interesting concept." And Creative Assembly were like, "Yeah, we're making that, but we can't talk about it." When that was praised as one of the only redeeming parts of Colonial Marines for
Which
some gamers.
which lost any impact on any subsequent playthrough. At least for
Yes,
me,
yes,
because it
yes,
just looks fucking stupid after that first time.
completely true, and it was very scripted. But the point was that there was a low bar there, but it did unwittingly give us a little potential glimpse, a very crude one, into what kind of gameplay we could maybe see then potentially in Alien Isolation. I remember the first time uh, seeing the announcement for the game, and just getting interested in checking out all of the promotional material, all of the trailers, all of the gameplay, all of the events. That was one the time that I was also becoming a more active member and more following AVP Galaxy generally as a site, because all of the news was there, and I was very curious about the game. I was so baffled by, so we're not going to be able to kill the alien. How's that possible? Okay, we're not going to be playing it then as a colonial marine, just as a civilian. It- will that be interesting? I don't remember actually playing pure horror games before that, so I wasn't really knowing what to expect. And of course, even though I'm pretty I'm softer on ACM than maybe a lot of the general audiences, but even then I was kind of disappointed with that game. So I wasn't really sure what to expect. And then with Alien Isolation, getting to play that for the first time, seeing the atmosphere, the lighting, the undescribable experience you get when you realize, okay, now I know how the crew felt in Alien. And now I understand that this is a completely valid way to experience the Alien franchise through the games. So I knew I was hooked the first time I had a nightmare where I was Amanda, with a nightmare of like Alien Isolation. I knew that then, yeah, this has really gotten into my psyche. And even though that maybe not everything, I did have a few disagreements with the game, but I won't look at it blindly and say it's absolute perfection. But most of my little nitpicks were actually changed later by Matt Filler's mods with abilities to custom make it so I can get the exact type of custom experience that I want, which has helped me immensely prolong the life of the game. And there's never a time where I go, If I play this, will I get bored? What will I do with the game?" But every time I try it, I'm completely hooked. And one of the things that I loved about the game, that even if it's a single player experience, it's so replayable because of the dynamic approach, the dynamic AI, and well, everything from the challenge modes, which is Alien Isolation bite size, or you can literally from 5 to 15 minutes get a whole heart-pounding experience to the longer, later challenge run DLC maps that are like medium sized, up to an hour, half an hour. And if you want something really bigger and epic, you play the campaign. I loved the variety there, and it has really become for me the best Alien gaming experience to date. It really is the best type of game you can expect from the alien horror side of things, which I really do hope they do justice for the sequel. But yeah, it is it has a special place in my heart when it comes to the Alien franchise. So I'm so glad that it's now involved more in the canon, even with Alien Romulus, etc.
Cool. Matt, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I wasn't really a gamer when I played it through the first time, so I'm ashamed to say that I played it through with a walkthrough on the other screen, and I was just sort of, I got the NES spoiled for me the first time I played through because I accidentally read ahead, and it was like, oh, now you've entered the NES. I was like, oh, right, okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's amazing that it's held up for 10 years. Like, if you look at it alongside some games that come out now, like it still looks better than some games that come out now, and the fact that that's all proprietary engine technology, I think is incredible. Like you could literally make a sequel in the same engine, and it probably would hold up against games that come out today, which I think is amazing. Um, there's some stuff I think that hasn't aged great, like some of the human encounters. I think probably if you were to redo them now, probably would be done differently. There's a lot of sort of very robotic things in the way that they act, and yeah, a lot of it doesn't feel very fluid in many ways. But yeah, and what I find interesting as well is like the actual elements of things you interact with are really like quite basic, really. Like the mini games, there's not that many mini games. They don't really evolve massively over the course of the game. A lot of the gameplay is just go to this point, press this button, go to this point, hack this terminal, go to this point, do that. But it's all the sort of dynamic elements of the gameplay that happen in between that with the alien and the androids and all of the ways you encounter them. Like there's so many things I feel like they were just playing the game and they were like, wouldn't this be cool? And they put it in and it just sort of stuck because like I was replaying it recently before because obviously I chatted to some other people about Alien recently, so I was like I should probably play it again because it's been a while since I've actually played the game, regardless of modding it every day. It's been a while since I've actually played the game, and there's so many sequences. Like there's the bit in the android showroom, for example, where you walk in and there's just this room full of static androids, and you're like, well, stuff's about
Fucking
to happen.
creepy.
Yeah, stuff is about to happen here. And then you press this button and they all come to life, and then you've got to use the little flamethrower thing on the wall to burn them and chuck all of your explosives at them. And it's like it's such cool sort of sequence of gameplay in this otherwise really quiet game where suddenly you're just throwing explosives at them constantly. And it's like there's so many like little sequences like that where I'm just like they clearly had fun making these things, and it's great to see. And it's nice that it's held up so well. Like I say, yeah.
Cool. I have always been obsessed with the fear aspect of Alien. You know, I've said it before on the show. You know, I had nightmares for 5 years as a kid when I first saw it, and that's what led to me being so utterly fascinated with everything and obsessed with it. It was all related to this fear, and that extended to the video games. You know, Trilogy. I used to watch my dad play it from. I'd be behind the settee, peeking out around the corner. Um, you know, mirroring some of the ways we look at Stompy in the game later on. And then I never dared play it myself. I never dared play Trilogy as a kid. But then I remember when I had AVP, what we call now Classic, you know, 99 Rebellion's first PC AVP game. And I would play the Predator. I would play the Alien, so I didn't have to come up against the aliens themselves in the dark. You know, with the Predator, it was fine because you had the vision mode and it wasn't so, you know, horror focused. And as a kid, I only ever got to the third level of the Marine campaign. My dad played the first mission for me. I played the second mission, and then the third mission, I didn't dare leave the APC at the start of the start of the mission. I would just stay in this APC. All the aliens would come to me, and I'd just be shooting them as they came through the doors, and I didn't dare leave because I was too fucking scared. So to me, the horror aspect of alien gaming is an important thing. 2010 had some good moments. You know, I remember the first mission was tense, and the second to some extent. AVP 2 I never found particularly scary because of the cel-shaded nature of the game. Same for Extinction, it wasn't supposed to be scary. But 2010 had some cool moments. Yeah, that's fine. We all know the disaster that was ACM. But when they announced a horror game for Alien, I was all on board for that. I was genuinely like, this is the kind of shit that means a lot to me. So I was always very interested in an actual genuine horror Alien game. I remember falling into that particular trap that we all did back then, though, of the apprehension of it. Oh, it's fucking Amanda. Why are they doing this? Why are we mining that well? Burke's already told us that she had an uneventful life. This is all. I don't need this. So that already put me off on a sort of back foot when it came to actually playing the game. But I went to some of the conventions in the UK. I remember going to one of the EGXs to play the Survivor mode. I got a T-shirt. I finished it. I was one of the people that actually finished it. I went through about 4 or 5 times to finish it. But I got there. I got my T-shirt. I got my name up on the scoreboard with my time total and how long it took me. I can't remember if I went to some of the other events. A lot of them have all mixed in my mind. But I also got to go and play the press slice at Creative Assemblies. It's one of 2 actual studio tours I've got to do over the course of the website. And I remember sitting down and playing that bit in KG, Project KG 348. I can never remember the fucking numbers. But the bit where you eject the alien off the lab off into the planet. And I remember coming out of that experience. So we were in this dark room. We had fancy, top of the line headphones on, fancy pants. What was a big telly at the time, all that kind of stuff. And I came out and I had to the the community rep person there. I had to be like, just give me a minute, please, just to sort of calm down because I was on a genuine adrenaline come down from the experience. That to me is what Alien Isolation is. It is that physical reaction that my body has to what's going off on the screen, what's going off in the ears, because the sound design of this game is so fucking important to the things that make it work, and just everything comes together in just this perfect way that has a reaction to me. And that's what I want from the experiences that I put time into. I remember when it actually came, when the game was released, and this is in the days when we still brought physical media, where we're sort of starting to transition. And I was like, I want my box on my shelf. So I'm having to wait for the copy to show up through the fucking letterbox in the morning while everybody else who's embracing Steam's already playing it through before me because they've all downloaded it. And I remember sitting there. At one point, I was actually sat on the stairs waiting for the postman to show up. And I played it over 2 days. And that first day, I've said this before on the streams and some of the other stuff we've done, but I was just so engrossed on it in the game and everything that was happening in the story, in the experience. And then I got to the reactor bit, the bit with the hive. The door opens, the mucus starts dripping as the door pulls back, and you see the hive for the first time. And I went, fuck it, I'm done for today. I cannot handle the inevitable fucking heart palpitations that this section is going to cause me. And I had to go and have my break. I came back the next morning, finished it all off. And I was like, I was so wrong to have any trepidation about this game. Story-wise, Amanda-wise, it's all perfect. It all pays off so well. The emotional journey that she has in the game. And I've loved it ever since. And, I know it's hard. I don't like stealth games. I hate things like Metal Gear Solid. I hate things like Splinter Cell. Obviously, they're different kind of games, but they're still very stealth focused. And I don't like stealth games. But this is a game where I was perfectly happy to spend 10 minutes sat inside a fucking locker or under a table or just looking at my motion tracker because it was just such an immersive and engrossing time. And to this day, I still love it. There are some small problems, I remember the sort of lip facial animations were always a thing that the game never quite got right and still don't to this day, even through all the various adaptations, that's the wrong word. Adam, what's the word I'm looking for?
Iterations?
Where they bring it to the other consoles.
Oh, ports.
Yeah, there we go. The ports. Fucking hell, that just flew over my head. All the other different ports. It's still, some of the weaknesses are still there. There's still some like little minor graphical bugs and blah 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 blah, but nothing major. And that's the great thing about the game. It was so well polished. It's like Matt said, it's been 10 years and this game still looks fucking amazing. How often do we get games like that? So I loved Isolation back then. I love it now. I wish I played it more. It's a game where I want to sit in and get engrossed. I played it over 2 days that first time. I don't do that very often these days, purely because, there's too much shit going off in adult life and it sucks and I want to be 20 all over again and just stay 20 all over again. But it's a game I don't play often enough because of that. And I can't really get into the survivor modes and stuff like that because it's a significantly harder version of the game. And to me, it's not just that experience. It is a lot about the narrative. It is a lot about the character. It is a lot about exploring the Sevastopol without the alien always being there. But, that's all part of the aspect of it. But I've been really enjoying replaying it in prep for this and in prep for the interview that we did with some of the developers. Although I hold my hands up. I played the first 2 missions on the PC. I've been and playing the rest on the Nintendo Switch version of the game because it's downstairs and, I get to play it on a big telly downstairs. But it's works so well on the Switch. It always has. Adam will tell you about how much he fucking loves the Apple port at some point during this podcast, and it's amazing that after all this time, it's resonated so well with the rest of the franchise. It's gone on to influence a lot of the things in a lot of the comics. We've had a lot of the references in Romulus. We got 2 separate ports that came out of fucking nowhere at some point. We've had some misfires of campaigns that were to do with them, like the read play watch stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a reason that whenever any new Alien game was announced, there was always some fans in the comments going, Alien Isolation 2, question mark, question mark, question mark. I don't verbalize it, but I think the same. But sometimes I'm just like happy to get what's coming and give them the chance. But yeah, and it's now good to finally have that to look forward to in the next 2 or 3 years. Anyway,
Lucky.
that's well, if we're lucky. Anyway, that's me. And our last guest is played this game for the first time somehow, and I'm curious to hear Sizzy's sort of thoughts on why it's took her personally so long to get to this. But from a as a giant Alien fan, as a big gamer yourself, why now? Why so long? And what did you think?
Shame. Yeah. I don't know why it took me so long. Honestly, I did watch Adam play the whole thing. So I was kind of like, I'll get to it. And I think when it came out, I wanted to play it on PC because I hate playing first-person games on console. Like, I'm just stupid with the controller first person. And I didn't have a computer that could run it at the time. And so it was just kind of put off and procrastinated, I suppose. But yeah, no excuses. I don't think. But really enjoyed my first playthrough. I have a pretty extensive background in playing survival horror games, including probably Amnesia, which is probably like very similar to Alien Isolation, and I played a lot of that. Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I played a lot of that game, and I see a lot of similarities, which of course, like Isolation, even though it came out 10 years ago, there was like, I want to say like, I don't want to say like better things, but like they did have some improvements on certain things, like how it was handled versus like a smaller company that, you know, was doing the best they could at the time. And Amnesia also has a lot of mods too. But I did, because I tend to forget, I wrote down a whole bunch of notes, which ended up kind of being useless. Like Stompy makes a mess. Because when you first run into, not when you first run into him, but when you first like find him, or one of the times he drops down, it's like in a bunk area for, I don't know, staff or whatever, and he just like threw boxes everywhere, and it was just like, it's like one of those like experience which is like so funny. Like I enjoy watching the physics of like his tail hitting something and it like launches a box like across like just the game, like just watching it like move like very unrealistically physically, like almost like the game Trespasser, and it was just really amusing. So I enjoyed all that kind of stuff. And then it's really like interesting just how they had so many like objects that were movable, that could be thrown around by that oversized alien. Let's see what else I got here. Oh, it's useless. But yeah, I had a good time playing it. I kind of felt like some parts I was walking through very confidently, like in that gif from like American Psycho when he's got the headset on and he's just like walking down the hall very seriously. And I also had probably the worst time ever during like the middle of the game, which I'm sure you can all guess what parts those were. And then after I got past that part, I had the best time ever again. So I feel like my whole experience was definitely like, wow, beginning of the game, awesome. Middle of the game, not having fun. Like middle end of the game, best time ever.
Was it San Cristobal? Did you get
Was it what?
San Cristobal, the hospital?
Oh, I love the hospital. I had such a fun time with Stompy. Oh, in like the medical area? Yeah. No, I heard that was the worst part. And I had a great time. I was like, oh, okay. I died a few times, but I was like, all right.
Which bits caused you problems? I'm curious.
Anything with the working Joes.
Oh, okay.
They made me nuts. Yeah, I guess I was very vague about that. Especially the big the heavy ones, like the maintenance ones, which were those?
You can't EMP.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of figured it out. I kind of got lucky during one area because there was like the 2 hemispheres you had to go through, and after I was like losing my mind because if they see you, you're kind of done. Like unless you can get far away from them and hide, but then you have like 4 after you. But I kind of got lucky to where I lured like a bunch of them into one hemisphere and did the what was it, the thing where you in like the server area where you can like make something happen and like gas kills them, and then like I got the other ones to the other side where there was like an electric thing that happened and that killed the other ones, and then I was just walking through the rest of the whole level. So it was like, oh, okay. Like that works. So I think it's pretty cool how the game has like, it does feel very like linear, but also there's like lots of ways you can handle certain situations. Like I had to reload saves from like dying or whatever, and it was interesting how it's like, oh, Stompy's not here, and then like reload save, oh, he's like all over the place. Like get out of here. So I thought that was kind of like interesting, like gameplay wise, just how his like AI works. Yeah.
So Coming to it for the first time then properly, after 10 years, you've probably heard from Adam, you've seen online how well regarded, how well hyped up the game is. Did it meet those expectations that you had?
Oh yeah, no, I thought it was really good. Yeah, and I do feel bad for not getting to it sooner. Like, but that's just shame on me. But yeah, it definitely did feel like, this feels very cozy to me as someone who played like a lot of like old survival horror games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill and even Amnesia, which I guess is kind of old at this point. So it's like, oh, I know this. This is familiar. And
So-
I like it a lot just because it is, for the most part, like you dealing with one alien rather than like the bug hunt, as it were. So it's like, oh, finally, it's an alien game that isn't like just shooting aliens, you know.
Mm. It's funny you bring up Amnesia. I remember getting a copy of that to play before Isolation came out, so I could get a feel for this kind of what Isolation would be like. I didn't
Mhm.
make it very far in Amnesia. I was
Oh.
like, I can't deal with this. But no, that's
Oh
cool.
no, like yeah, Amnesia. It's like, I guess if you haven't played anything like that before, you're just kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah. Right. Where should we start? Should we talk Amanda then to start us off with, or Adam, have you got a suggestion?
Real quick, I just wanted to kind of build on the mention of Amnesia, and that being this breakout hit indie kind of survival horror game at the time. And Isolation, I think, did a risk by moving to first person at the time, because the horror gaming space was kind of an awkward space. I mean, both Resident Evil and Silent Hill were kind of in the middle of an identity crisis at the time, and those were the big ones. And you still had Dead Space, but I believe it was 2013 where you had Dead Space 3, which fans really did not like. At least it was divisive. Uh, but third person was kind of the norm in terms of survival horror, and I do feel like Amnesia with Isolation, as well as the game Outlast, if you guys have heard of that one, those three games I think helped bring first person survival horror to the mainstream. Both in the indie gaming space, because we see that a lot now, but also Resident Evil did that with a mainline entry for the first time, and the one following it with Resident Evil Village. Uh, Silent Hill has experimented with that. You had that PT demo that came out, unfortunately, which didn't become anything. But more recently, with the revival of the Silent Hill franchise, you've had Silent Hill the short message, which feels very much kind of inspired by PT. So I think Alien Isolation was a very important part of survival horror gaming, kind of reaching a modern evolution, as it were, I'd say. So I just wanted to take a second to bring that up. And I know Amnesia, I have never finished it myself. The second game was way more divisive. I've heard better things about the third and fourth game, and I think it's the fourth game is called The Bunker. That's actually been compared to Isolation quite a bit, because you're pursued by like the singular monster through these underground tunnels. So I am quite curious about that one. Um, but yeah, just outside of the alien space, it's just so cool the impact Isolation's had in the survival horror space in particular.
It's funny because I remember thinking back then how much I would have liked a Dead Space Alien. How much I really did want that third person alien horror game. Because like I said, horror to me is Alien. But now in this post isolation world, I struggle to want anything other than survival horror following the isolation template. I'm like, don't get me wrong, if it was announced, I'd give it a go, because we've seen from like the Dead Space remake that it all still works. But I can't picture any alien survival horror game as anything other than an isolation-esque thing. It's a weird sort of shift there.
Yeah, it's really interesting seeing the old demo footage where they had the third person build. And obviously with like all the sticky cover controls they had and all these sorts of things, like the environments look exactly the same, but then just the way it plays and the way you just feel so disconnected from the environment essentially. Like it's not you doing this thing; it's you're controlling the character doing this thing. It's an interesting distinction that literally just the taking the camera and attaching it to the head had made such a difference, because if you look in the code, it's literally just they have put the camera here. It makes such a difference. Obviously all the animations had to be redone, but it's just incredible switch to just fully immerse you in what's going on, and it just makes it 10 times more scary. It's
It
interesting.
feels third person just feels like a cheat because you've got the advantage of the camera. You don't have to risk your character peeking up over a piece of cover that you're behind or a door. You just sort of get your cover, swing your camera around a little bit, and there's no risk. It feels less immersive. That's where I think isolation really excels in its immersion. Even peeking is a risk. Pulling your motion tracker out if Stomp is too close to you is a risk, and it's just this. I mean, it's first person. That is your eyes, and it excels at that immersive quality. Shall we talk Ripley first then? I'm curious to everybody else's thoughts on the sort of character that they chose to go with. Greg, do you have any thoughts? Do you want to lead us off?
Well, as far as Amanda Ripley goes, I don't remember what was my first reaction when we found the news about that, but I do remember that it was a bit strange. Again, from my perspective, coming off of the previous games where it was kind of a given that you're a new character every time, and then seeing that this time we're actually playing as, well, not a movie character per se, but somebody that was mentioned and the daughter of our main heroine. I was a bit perplexed, and like everybody else, who are arguing, well, we know what happens to Amanda. Why would Burke be lying? Blah blah, etc. Or either we know she'll survive, which is kind of a cop out. I mean, for most games, our protagonist does survive, so uh, it wouldn't really change that much if it was somebody else. Uh, but at the same time, yeah, people were worried because is it leaning too much on an established character? Uh, I also was kind of wary there because, as the latest game at the time, Colonial Marines, where we had Hicks involved, knowing what kind of performance and how that was integrated into the whole game was very forced, and I honestly didn't appreciate it and like that type of retcon that he's alive, etc. So yeah, I was also concerned there. But as Aaron has mentioned there, when we get to this story and the experience, I completely forgot, and the immersion is to such a degree that it's not like I ever have a moment to think, "Oh, does this make sense for Amanda to be there? What would she do? What would she do later if she survives? How would that impact?" No, Uh, she she was there in the area looking for any traces from her mother that she said she was going to show up, never did. Makes sense. And yeah, the whole Samuel's giving her a chance, that's a nice character thing, not completely impossible there. And after that, it's just survival. Yeah, she starts with trying to find out the details, but after she finds out that the flight recorder is deleted, etc., it's a just survival process for her. So, like any other person on the station, she's trying to get out alive. And I also do remember really liking that they've made her an engineer, somebody who can use their wits and little bits and pieces here and there all over the station to make these gadgets. And I thought that was very uh, creative and interesting to see how that would interact with the environment, with each enemy. So I really do appreciate how they characterized her there as well, and in the addition that she's not just a protagonist there that's fighting against the company. she is working for Weyland-Yutani at the start. She is one of their employees. All of the Torrens crew are, and that was also a strange shift, having that then compared to a completely new company with new androids, and uh, all of the new additions completely melded into a story that not for 1 second since I started playing the game did I think that doesn't belong there or anything. It just perfectly meshed. Even though so many new things were brought in there, the new usage of Amanda Ripley, uh, but the also new original creations with the Cease and Company and Working Joes. So when all of that was combined, it felt completely like it was always there. It was always part of the universe. I can't now imagine a part of the Alien universe continuity that doesn't have Seeks and Working Joes and Amanda Ripley doing what she did there. The later installations of the story do feel a bit more forced, do feel tacked on, and especially recent years with the novels, etc., with mining Amanda's and Azula's usage in the appearances, that's now starting to grind my gears, especially because from entry to entry you see different characterizations and in completely different atmospheres. So that's something that I wish that they would have let her be, because her arc there was done completely well. Yes, of course, there's a room for something else, and just as Aaron said, I don't mind Blackout. Yes, it's not Alien Isolation 2, which people wanted at the time, but uh, it worked perfectly well. It was fun. Uh, it had interesting options and modes. It again, even though we all know what kind of basis for the game it is, it's something that's completely, again, believable in universe that she could have been doing. The whole mechanics worked, and her little bits and pieces of the dialogue there just added to her characterization and interactions with the other characters. So maybe I can give Blackout a pass for reusing her, of course, and but after that in other appearances, I wasn't too happy. So we don't know if Alien Isolation 2 will have Amanda, if will it, won't they? But if somebody's going to reuse that character, of course, I would want the people who created Alien Isolation to uh, have a go at it. But at the same time, since she was done so well, so believably, even though we didn't have a lot of details about her background life, but the little interactions, how she just felt real, like a real person. She didn't feel like a clone of her mother at all. She felt like her own individual being, which we don't know the complete background, but was a believable character there, reacting to the situation and having some of her own decisions and impulses influence that. So I'm kind of wary of seeing her in any other medium again, because I do not want her image to be ruined more and more. So I'm very apprehensive if she's going to be used in Alien Isolation 2. But again, if anybody can make it work, the creators, they maybe could. But in other places like the comics and novels, please stop. But
I
yeah,
feel
that's
like
my feeling.
Adam will be right next to you with that one, because you're not a particular fan of her in Resistance and Rescue, are you?
Yeah, so the I guess the Read Play Watch campaign, which came out, when was that, Aaron? Like what, 2019 or something, 2018, where
So somewhere around then. You continue. I'll look it up.
they had all these amazing pieces of concept art to tease this new alien media that was coming. We had no idea what it was, but this concept art was really stunning. Too stunning, perhaps, because it set up these expectations, I think, among fans. Oh shit, we're getting an Isolation sequel. Like, what else is happening now? It ended up being a number of Isolation related projects, including this Machinima series. I think it was just called Alien Isolation, the digital series or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
And when we finally did watch it, it was very apparent they did not have the budget they needed to work with. It did have some interesting elements in terms of the new animation, which was like, it showed us a bit of an epilogue after Isolation, and that part was pretty cool. overall the series was a bit of a dud in my opinion. But the one everyone was pissed about was Blackout, because everyone was very much hyped for an Isolation sequel, and you guys are doing a mobile game, so everyone raged about it. I do feel like that was the closest to an authentic Isolation experience, honestly. That wasn't the original game. Um, but yeah, the comics that Amanda Ripley starred in, Resistance and Rescue, I feel like more so Rescue. Neither one of them were that great, unfortunately. And I feel like
Nope.
they had kind of made Amanda Ripley. It seemed like she had just done too much, like had this whole life of fighting aliens and Wayland Yutani, like that would have more significance when her mother is finally looking at her photo in the Aliens special edition. And it's kind of like, can she's been through so much, can she not just have a normal life and retire or something without dealing with this for her entire life? That's not to say
If Ellen didn't get one, why should Amanda get one?
fair enough, but that's some serious bad family luck. I would not be opposed to seeing her again in Isolation 2. I feel like she is a core part of the Isolation identity, and like you said, Greg, if anyone can pull it off, it's Creative Assembly. I know there were some leaks saying that Blackout would be disregarded in terms of a narrative. And as much as I like Blackout, I think that's a good idea if they were to do a follow up of Isolation starring Amanda Ripley, to just ignore all that. Just ignore Resistance and Rescue. Ignore the digital series. Ignore Blackout. Just start fresh with another story for her. I think. I mean, just the fact that Isolation 2 has been announced brings up so many questions. Like, where is this going to take place? When is this going to take place? Is this going to be immediately following the first game, or is this going to be years in the future where she's at another point in her life, maybe trying to get over what happened here? So it just brings up a lot of interesting questions. But yeah, unfortunately, the only kind of hint we had that we might be getting some meaningful follow-ups to Isolation just turned out to be a massive disappointment back then, which is why I think everyone feels so elated now, because everything we wanted has finally been announced. Like, whoa, Sega's back publishing a new Isolation game, and they did all these posts celebrating the anniversary with all this cool stuff in terms of like this lo-fi girl collaboration. That was cool. The new album releases on vinyl, on tape deck, which feels very appropriate again. um so yeah, it just feels like this game maybe didn't perform the way it did off the bat because of a number of factors for Sega, but they've come to realize that the game has had a lasting legacy and an only increasing reputation. So it's just great to see that recognized among the people that were responsible for producing it, and to know that yeah, eventually we will see a follow up.
Matt, how do you feel about Amanda in this? Did you have any strong thoughts
I
going
mean,
into it?
yeah, I think she's the obvious choice, really. Like to try and reboot the series essentially for a new generation. Like Ellen Ripley has had her time in the sun. Like she has done so much stuff. Like is it Out of the Shadows, the book where she gets
Yeah,
yeah
reintroduces her.
yeah, she comes out of hypersleep and fights a load of aliens, and then oh, sorry, I forgot about it, and then goes back into hypersleep again. It's like, how much more can you do? So I mean, I think it makes sense to use a new character, and I mean, keeping the connection to the family, I guess, is a good way to be like, hey, this is connected to the events of the films, and then obviously you get the nice thing with the audio log where you've got a little throwback with the actual voice of Ellen Ripley as well. There was a really neat little thing that was put in the game. But yeah, obviously it's people were like, well, why wouldn't Burke have told her about it? But I mean, like they were trying to sort of be like, You're going mental. You're talking all this stuff about aliens and things like you're not saying clearly. Like he's not going to sit there and go, well, your daughter went through exactly the same thing you went through, I guess. So this is obviously with the shady guy that he was not going to reveal that sort of thing anyway. But yeah, I think she was the obvious choice, and it definitely doesn't feel like the game is just sort of playing on that thread. The audio log does seem a bit like, why would have Ellen have recorded telling her all these details about the aliens on a sort of Wei piece of tech that they probably could have read the same message and been like, oh well, okay, interesting. But at the same time, it's a nice little payoff, and it sort of adds some credence to the mission where you go on the Anesidora and you get the big reveal, obviously, and then all the nice sequence that happens there where the ship falls apart. That's yeah, I think it's great. It's the right choice. I think if they'd chosen to use a random throwaway character, the game would have felt too disconnected from like sort of everything else that was going on, and I feel like it wouldn't have resonated with people as well, or it wouldn't have been like, oh, you're playing as the daughter. Like there's the sort of the instant connection there of, oh yes, I like the film. This is so close to the film. Now you're literally playing as a character related to a character from the film. Like I feel like it's a nice tie-in. They didn't feel overplayed.
Sizzy?
Me. Amanda, like I really loved her as a character in Alien Isolation, but I do want to say that I am very critical of having like old characters or connections to old characters like come back again, because it's like, especially I feel like with like the Ripley thing, it's just like, gosh, oh look, she's back again. Like I feel like that was a sentiment a lot of you guys brought up, and it's like we got to find a way to bring Ripley in this media, like somehow, because that's what people want. It's like, oh my gosh, no, stop. So I was like a little kind of critical of that, but I really liked Amanda's character just throughout the game, because she was like, like she was just kind of like a, blue collar worker. So she was just like, oh, I don't give a shit. Like, I need to get out of here. Like, she had her points where it was like, oh, terrible things are happening and I'm frightened. But she was just like, okay, let's get things done, kind of attitude. And like, and I appreciated that. But yeah, the flight recorder part near the very end that she like hears, like, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it, but it was like it was such a good moment for her character, because like when you find like the Nostromo's like black box at the beginning, and there was just that feeling of like, oh great, I'm here for nothing and I'm trapped in hell having the worst day of my life for no reason at all. Like, and I feel like that would have been good, but I also just like when she got the like little message from uh, her mom. It was like, oh, that's so nice. Like that was really sweet.
It's just such a good emotional release at the end of the game.
Yeah, because it's
But I
like
mean,
she got something. She got a little something,
but I mean, at this point when this came out, I was probably only buying a couple of games every now and again, and two of the games I was playing at this point was Tomb Raider and Isolation, and both Lara Croft and both Amanda Ripley are fucking punished so hard throughout both of those games. And it's like you were saying there, when she shows up to the black box for the first time and there's nothing on the fucking thing, it's like it's a gut punch. She
Yeah.
goes through the rest of this shit. She gets dragged through a hive, falls down elevator shafts and all that kind of stuff. And then you get to this message at the end of it, and it's just like, this is worth it. This emotional release that I have
Yeah.
right now
She got
after having
something.
been beaten up. It's one of the strengths of the game for me, and it's one of the things that makes it worth having Amanda in it. Just that moment alone for me.
I think it was also a great decision to make her an engineer, and just have that be a part of the gameplay, that she's having to improvise these different devices to help her survive. Because it's like an important part of the gameplay, but it also helps develop her as a character. Like, this is her place in the alien universe. There's a lot of technology in the alien universe, and they definitely need engineers. So to see her just doing her job so well, at the same time there to try and resolve this personal issue for her. Yeah, I mean, I would, just like you, Aaron, I was worried about her when we first heard it. It's like, so it's somebody's brother, sister again, and another alien thing. But and I honestly think that's become worse now these days, unfortunately. But
Titan.
Yeah, she's proven us all wrong. I mean, she's been a very good character, and yeah, I don't see how they could do an Isolation 2 without her. Honestly, I think the expectation is like she's just such a core part of that Isolation identity that I don't think you could do that.
Sorry, before we move on too much further there, I agree with the thing about her being an engineer. Adam, you said it. I think Greg and Matt also said it. It not only does it work from a gameplay point of view with the crafting stuff, but it's also kind of funny in terms of it being the class that her mother was arguing with in Alien. You know, Brett and Parker were the engineers, and she was Amanda Ripley was standing off against them. So it's kind of funny in that kind of way. But her being tied to Isolation as a gameplay format, a game style, I disagree with it. I mean, I don't think she's necessary for the type of game that we're playing. Anybody could be a character. It could be a brand new character. It could be some other character somewhere else, whatever. I don't think it matters to Isolation as a style. For the story that they wanted to tell with this one, it works really well. You know, if they wanted to go and recreate the environments of Alien, and I mean, from a world building point of view, you can skip all that anyway. You know, how many times have I joked in the past about Space Hack here? And yes, I might joke about it, but I genuinely think there is a level of prefab that goes off in the future world, in colonies and space station buildings, blah blah blah. That's why you got all these places that look so similar. I think there's plenty of valid in-world reasons that can be done for it. And I don't think Amanda was quite necessary just to do what they did gameplay wise, but story wise, they nailed it all the way through. She has every reason to be looking for her mother. I suppose perhaps if the intent was to have that message at the end to actually get the original cast back and do things with it, yes, Amanda is required because it gives that connective tissue more strength, more reason. Of course, Amanda's knocking around where her mother went missing. Of course she is. Of course she's going to jump at the chance to go and check it all out. That works. That works very well, and I'm kind of glad it does because I still think the whole Burke lied thing is a little bit flimsy because I think it's more likely Burke just didn't fucking know. You know, I think it's that information, it was either lost or deleted or Weyland-Yutani was unaware of.
He's not high enough on the totem pole to know that information.
Yeah, or what was it, 15 years before Aliens?
Well, it's something we
No,
see.
15 year after Alien.
Something like that,
Yes.
which would put it pretty close to Romulus, I guess. But I mean, it's something we see in the game. We have this junior Weyland-Yutani executive who's part of the Torrens crew, Taylor, and she's trying to secure the alien so that she can advance in the company. But ultimately, she's pretty clueless as to what's going on. And those higher than her in the company, they've taken over the station and taken over the computer. So I feel like maybe it's a similar situation with Burke, where he is a junior exec and he has this ambition and he's trying to move up the ranks, but ultimately he does not know the history of this thing. And like you've said, Aaron, there's a lot of corporate redundancy and disconnection in the Alien universe. I mean, it would explain, or at least try to explain, why they seemingly just abandoned this important Romulus space station in the recent film. But yeah, I feel that was an interesting element of the game, even though Seegson was the focus here. Weyland-Yutani was very much in the background. And it would be interesting, I think, at the sequel to focus a bit more on Weyland-Yutani. But not only so. I feel like Alien Isolation's contribution was showing us a bit more beyond just Weyland-Yutani. So that, I think, should be maintained as well.
Seegson was such a fantastic addition to the lore. More so than, I mean, we've had other organizations in the universe. We've had Bionational, we've had Grant Corporation, Chigusa. Yeah, was it Chigusa?
Yeah.
In
from
AVP. Yeah. So we've had these other organizations, but none are so well developed to Seegson, because all those in-world logs, you know, the Ion Seegson stuff, the Julia Jones stuff, it just paints such a vivid picture of what's going off in a way that none of the other lore has ever done for any of these other entities. And I mean, it does such a good job of painting the downfall of Seegson and of Sevastopol. It kind of makes me also not want to see them keep cropping up, because I'm like, whoa, weren't these guys like on the verge of collapse, you know?
They
But
got
then
those
again,
military contracts for Fireteam Elite.
true, yeah, those, yeah, the alpha and beta are actually Seegson branded, aren't they? Yeah. So fair enough. Maybe they did recoup, and they exist somewhere, and Ransom got a message off to his, you know, corporate partner somewhere, and they're going after it. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to see them continue with Seegson, but I imagine it'd also be hard to have that same sort of success over and over again with developing a new entity for them to go against.
Oh, I wanted to try with a new company. Seeing how well and unexpected it was having a new entity there, I would be all for it. I agree that, yeah, we've had other companies in other media, but again, on the video game side, before Isolation, I'm not really sure, especially not so dominantly, any other company was present. So having that was a really nice step. So I'd be all for them trying to do something original in that sense, because
What if they expanded out like Grant Corp or Bionational? I think I'd be more
yeah,
interested in that, to be honest. Especially
100% with that as well.
Bionational. But the world building in the game was top notch, just outside of Sevastopol. Things like the Joe, you know, how iconic have the working Joes become?
Yeah, I love
It's
all of the different concept arts for them as well. Like, because originally they looked more human, and then when they moved from them being more human into the sort of more robotic looking ones, they had these different concept arts. So there's like ones with like sort of hair pieces and all these sorts of things and baseball
they look
caps. And
so freaky.
yeah,
The
I'd
the
love to
hair
see
the
them
hair
in a game.
pieces in particular, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
But like,
I forgot about the wigs when they had the wigs on. Sorry, that you just reminded me. I was just gonna say that it's like I was like, oh, the working Joes, like, of course they would have like there'd be a competitor like to the Wayland synthetics, you know, and it's like they just happen to be the AliExpress ones, and it's just like, and they're defective, and the company's cutting corners. So I'm like, that sounds very realistic, honestly. Like,
did Isolation say that Hyperdyne was a subsidiary of Wayland Yutani then? I can't remember.
I can't remember if Isolation mentioned Hyperdyne. I know Hyperdyne was mentioned a lot in Fireteam Elite.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adam is correct there that I'm almost certain that Hyperdyne does not appear in any log or
But
anything
they
in
mention,
Isolation.
I mean, they mention like 128s instead of A2s or something in the game, if I remember rightly, when Smythe and Spedding are talking about getting the schematics.
Oh, to see what the
To say
competitor
how
is
far behind,
doing.
yeah. I'm now just thinking that's actually perhaps a little bit of an inconsistency, because Hyperdyne's supposed to be Hyperdyne, not Wayland.
One only we
Yeah.
would notice.
Newer lore is going on again, off again with that Hyperdyne was and then wasn't and then was again, with constantly becoming independent and then being reabsorbed by Wayland Yutani, trying to meld it that way. So yeah, who knows?
But Sizzy, I'm curious as to your more gameplay-ish opinions on the Joes, if you're saying that they were the bits that you found
The
not
bane
so
of my
fun.
existence. I'm honestly like, because I want to play it again, so I'm wondering if it's like now I'm more used to the game and like the mechanics, like if I'll just breeze right through it, which has happened before with games I struggled with. I was like, oh, this sucks, this is so hard, and then I get to it again, and I'm just like, oh, I don't even know why I was complaining. But like, I don't know, I got like stuck at a part where I think like one thing, and this is like a personal thing, is I don't like games that kind of like lock you into an animation, I guess. I always like to be able to like scoot away, and if they can still hit you and deal damage, that's like good. But I I don't know. I think that was more of a popular thing back then, back then, 10 years ago, of like having like these like cool animations and stuff, even with like AVP 2010. Like it's like, oh gosh, here we go again. Like here's this death animation. Which is fine with the alien, but I I kind of would rather be able to like try and maneuver around things while still taking damage. And one thing that affected me a lot with the working Joes is I'd get locked into their them grabbing you or throwing them around, and Stompy overrides their attack. So I'd be in the middle of fighting the working Joe, and then I out of my peripherals, I see Stompy drop down, and I'm like, well, that's it. Because he just comes in, and he did clip through the working Joe a couple of times. And I saw the working Joe just kind of like stand up, not in its T pose, but it was just like standing normally, because it was like, this something like, this animation has ended, this animation has started. It was pretty amusing, but I was very frustrated because it was like, I can't get out of here. Like I'm stuck, help, I'm stuck fighting. I played on a mouse and keyboard, so I'm like tapping E rapidly as I see Stompy come running towards me. I'm like, oh no, I can't get out of this, because once he runs at you, unless you have the flamethrower, you're kind of screwed.
See, I always liked those moments because it was again a part of the difficulty of the game, in that if you've fucked up and got caught by one of the Joes while Stomp is around as well, more, no offense, Sizzy, but more for you at that point, for getting caught. Um, and the animation the visual, sorry, of Stompy just barging past the Joes and throwing them aside is one I loved seeing. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, sometimes it glitched out like what you're saying, but it was always cool just to see him sort of barge them away and get onto you. And even like the death grip stuff that the Joes have, it feels on brand with what the game's doing, because when Stompy gets hold of you, that's it. So if your enemies are getting
The
hold of you,
cutscene, yeah, it's a death
I,
animation.
I will say it was a bit frustrating with how much you're on computer terminals in this game when you do get locked into like one of those computer terminals, and you start seeing the damage impact of a working Joe just hitting you, and you're trying to back out of the animation, and it does the little log off of the computer thing. I'm like, I wish that was just a little faster if I'm being attacked, but
Oh, I agree there completely, especially when you say about the speed of the animation. Yeah, how slowly Amanda is getting into and out of them while she's being attacked. But also that reminds me of the slowness of the locker animation or getting into the vent. It can be quite
Slamming
slow
the
for some, but
locker. I hope you didn't
yeah,
hear that. It's
yeah, yeah.
right there.
That as well, and how long it takes for her to open and close. That's sometimes that is a bit janky, but
it's all part of the tension, though. That's the thing. Like, when
agreed.
you're, I mean, I had it the other day when I was playing the Gemini Labs bit, because that's notoriously annoying, in quotation marks, with Stompy coming towards the bit where you've got to do the power regulator stuff. And sorry, that bit's fresh in my mind. But in there, I'd try and go for a save, and then I'd start to hear him come round the back, and I'd be like, "Oh shit, cancel!" To then go and run, hide behind some stuff. And it's just part of the experience. It's part of that tension. It's part of that decision making, and that randomness of the isolation experience, in my opinion.
I think that same part was the part you were really frustrated, if I'm not mistaken, Sizzy. The power regulator stuff where you do
Oh yeah,
the service order, and Stompy's just very persistent at that moment, and you're also dealing with a Joe at the same time.
probably. Yeah, I think like I kind of learned after that. It's just like I said, sometimes uh, with the AI, like sometimes things happen and sometimes they don't. Now I'm just kind of like reload last save. Sometimes restart the mission if you kind of like fucked yourself, I suppose. It's because then it's like it's fresh, and it's like, okay, I need to be more careful at this part because it feels like sometimes like Stompy just gets like really aggressive if you're constantly just throwing shit at him and making noise. Whereas like if you avoid him, he kind of like loses interest and he'll go somewhere else, or he'll be like more just kind of like walking around looking for you. At least that's kind of what I got out of it, because I feel like if I was quieter, he wasn't around as much. Like
Now that's due to the way he learns, in quotation marks.
yeah,
So
he's amazing. Like that's amazing though. Like
yeah. So I mean, the less encounters you have with him, the less his behavior stuff unlocks and triggers and stuff like that. So you get more respite using those same tools later on if you've not abused them as much.
yeah, no, definitely.
Which is interesting. And it kind of makes me, I've always sort of wondered why have they not used this sort of approach in more of the games since, just in terms of behavior and learning, again in quotation marks. I have to wonder if it's very intensive on the game.
Probably. I mean, I'm not sure, but like some of the stuff that I saw him do, not to like go on like a wow, Stompy's AI is amazing. I was like I
By all
was like
means.
hiding behind a pillar, and I was kind of like playing Ring Around the Rosie with him, and he was like he knew I was there, and he was actually crouched down and looking around the pillar, like trying to find me. So we're like doing like this thing, and I was like, wow, that's like really cool, like very cat and mousey. Like it's like, oh, he's like trying to hone in on me. Like I can like feel his little computer AI like working. Like I know there's something there, but my little vision can't quite see it yet. And I was like, that's very like impressive, like to me personally. So it's probably also pretty intense to program.
Yeah, it's a big bet to sort of rely most of the gameplay on something that's entirely dynamic, which I think is why most games probably shy away from doing that sort of thing, because there's so many design considerations to take into account, like to sort of have all of these, because the Alien has like these sort of things that it will do that are just sort of set sequences that happen in response to doing certain things. And so there's a lot of these sequences are designed, and then they just sort of play out feeling like they're more random. Obviously, the whole encounter is random, but like it has these sort of set things of like responding to certain suspects and all these sorts of things. And designing for these sort of things, I think, is a real art that they perfected for this game. Which is that it just feels so raw and genuine and visceral, and like having the most of the gameplay be based around that, I think is amazing, rather than like scripted sequences where you're actually doing things that you know the outcome is going to be. It's this sort of unknown factor that's it's quite impressive to pull off, really.
Like the
Yeah.
NPC kind of animation of them just walking back and forth, I'm glad it's not like that, where it's like this NPC will go up this hallway, go in this room, type on the computer, come back out, walk back down the hallway. So it's kind of nice that you don't expect that, and it made for a lot of like just cool encounters for me, because it's like it seems like his AI is like working and he's like walking around doing his thing, but then like Matt said, it's like, oh, you did this, so therefore he's reacting in this way, kind of thing. And it's like, whoa, that's like interesting, just how they programmed all that.
It is certainly one of the strengths of the game. There's no denying that, and they design around it well with the use of the vents and stuff like that, giving Stompy, this free route around you, above you, and also adding a little bit extra, again, tension into the game through the fucking vents. I remember the first time I ran into the drool. I sort of heard something. I didn't quite clock the visuals of all the drool coming down, and I'm just plodding along like a fucking pleb that I am. And next thing I know, dragged up into the vents with some teeth in my face.
There was another moment too where I was crawling underneath this grate, looking up through the grate, and the alien was there and noticed me and ran off. And suddenly I hear it crawling in the vents under the floor where I'm at, and it's slowly just crawling towards me. It can't move as fast because it's so big crawling through this vent. but yeah, those parts are terrifying too. The feeling that no matter where you are, you're not completely safe. Now, having played through the game a number of times, there are some moments where you're like, no matter what I do here, the alien's not going to show up, even outside of like that middle part of the game. But yeah, the rest of the game, you definitely are trying to be careful not to make too much noise or too much of a ruckus. But there's other times too where you have a situation and you're like, I want Stompy to deal with this, so here's a noisemaker. Stompy, go handle this for me. And those parts are a fun kind of reversal of that as well.
He saved me so many times. I was literally like, oh no, Stompy saved me. Like throw a flare, and then I just hear dun 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 dun, and then all the horrible noises that came with that. And I was like, huh, you. And I'm like, and then I just walk past it while he's distracted. It was like kind of having your own like a trained lion, like occasionally.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that he has more roam of the levels than you do, which is quite a unique thing because like the way he navigates above the level, he literally has his own separate nav mesh above the level. So you operate on sort of the lower floor, and then obviously you have the different vents, and then he has his whole sort of network of being able to move around the map up the top, which I think is this really unique thing where there's like sort of this whole other world going on above you that you don't get to see. Um, Obviously that leads to then all these dynamic encounters like we're talking about, and then you've still got down on the ground like the Joes, which are the more traditional, like you say, walking between point A to point B and giving you all their sort of vocal cues of, oh, you shouldn't be here, and all this sort of stuff, which is again so iconic. It's a great variety of things that all comes together to have a really sort of fun gameplay and memorable gameplay, and lots of moments that are just like feels like you're experiencing them for the first time and nobody else has encountered them, which I think is why it's so like resonates with people. It feels very sort of personal.
And the Joes themselves continue that terror and tension vibe of the rest of the game so well. You know, the amount of times you just see this pair of eyes, shining through the dark. Because I play with the gamma all the fucking way down. Well, not literally all the way down, but very low down. So it boosts the atmosphere for me. But like just these pinpricks of light coming in, you're trying to like, okay, are they red? Are they blue or white
Oh,
or whatever the color is? Yeah. And like even the details of the design. Yes, we've laughed at some of the wig stuff, but just this. I mean, it's a great thing that the game does as well in terms of world building of using their not humanness as a selling point of, oh, you always know a working Joe. You'll never be deceived by a what's Terminator's T800. You'll never be you'll never mistake
T600.
him.
T600s are the ones that I was just about to bring that up. They're the ones that look like the rubber mask with the hair on it.
I was thinking the Arnie model. You'll never
Oh, okay.
mistake a Joe for an Arnie model.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Those are the T800s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to mix franchises there a little bit. But that's such a cool both world building element, but game design element as well, because it's that uncanny valley stuff. It's that gives you that unsettled freakiness, and even like the little details of the model of like the creases of the plastic at the back of the neck. It's fantastic fucking detail. I start to then get wound up about how much I love everything in the game and how it all comes together and turn into that little rambling fucking nerd in the corner.
We've all done it.
Yeah, I really like the Joes.
It's brilliant
I
when you
always-
attack them with the EMPs, when you attack them and they just freak out completely, and then when you
Mm.
kill them, they just start spewing the milk out their mouths. It's like all these moments are just so great. Yeah.
I
I
found
always took the Working Joes to also be a reference to maybe the Doctor Who mannequin autons. To me, I found a lot of visual similarities there, but I don't know if anybody else.
Will
saw similar.
mentioned it when we interviewed him. Actually, was like the 70s Doctor Who inspiration. But I think that also fits into that whole design mentality that they had in the game of this is shit that was made before the 80s. Is the visual references, the sound reference, and stuff like that. So it's probably quite deliberate in that intent.
I was on the Perfect Organism recently, and they actually did a whole podcast episode on just the Working Joes, and I made the comparison of like John Carpenter's Halloween with Michael Myers, just the blank white face of this lumbering figure
Captain
slowly
Kirk.
kind of pursuing you. Yeah, so it was Yeah, the Working Joes are definitely an interesting addition to the lore, which this game has a number of interesting additions to the overall lore. But we've seen more advanced versions of them in other games, in Dark Descent as well as Fireteam Elite. So it'll be curious to see where they take those. As part of the 10th anniversary celebrations, the official Alien Isolation social media account run by Sega posted this like weekly Working Joe thing, like a interaction they did for every day. So
Set of the week.
there's also this element of humor of them as well as the like terror aspect. So yeah, they're just such an interesting new addition to the lore in terms of like Aliens always had a significant focus on like synthetics and androids, but taking that beyond just human lookalike synthetics and exploring other dynamics with that, I think was an important part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing that I really liked about the Working Joes, uh, especially comparing their design and purpose with their AI. So I don't know if this is completely true or logical, but since we have the alien with that enormous amount of dynamism to it and unpredictability and all those complex behavioral patterns, maybe because of that, it takes a lot of resources, so less AI focus on the humans and the androids, which for especially the synthetics, here the Working Joes, that works perfectly since they're so robotic and simple in that sense. It's a perfect decision that maybe is compartmentalized with the limitations of how much their AI can do in game as well, because they do have a lot more of that patrolling pattern and not so many layers, which is completely fitting with how they are uh, built as a real thing in the universe and makes a lot more sense there. So seeing them doing the patrols is a lot more to me disturbing as well, and I've seen a lot of people in the community have garnered quite a huge liking to them, and they're very creeped out by them. Sometimes people say that they are even more creeped out by the Working Joes than the alien, probably because some people are desensitized to the creature. But since this is a new thing, and just having that blank mannequin face with those glowing eyes are completely perfect design decision that was new from Creative Assembly, and it just worked. And it, as we've noted here, it stuck so well that so many entries after that have been using it again and again, and completely validly without any complaints by the fandom there. I just wanted to comment as well about uh, yes, the alien AI that Matt was mentioning. Yeah, the thing that struck me mostly there is because of how dynamic that creature behaves there, it feels more alive than any alien encounters before or since, even in the newer games. Because of that unpredictability and all those layers of behavior, and especially with Matt's open cage tool, where we can tamper and see the little tidbits. How does it work? Seeing all those layers, seeing all those modifiers for how the senses work, how far the leash goes with the patrolling. There's so much thing going on underneath the hood, but uh, but the basics of it is actually not too complex to understand in that sense. But when you layer those things on top of each other, it really makes something completely special. And also I think that for our listeners, Xenomorph and Eric, which didn't like some of the aspects of Alien Isolation about how the alien behaves and cheats. Uh, I think if he played a modded version with the behavior that suited to what he expects more from the alien, I think he would love it a lot more. So some of the things that Adam said, where the creature won't then attack you in some positions, that's all because it's done in a fairly balanced way. When you're doing important things, the big AI knows to back off there. But if you want, through these tools, you can tweak it and make it completely unpredictable and chaotic for there. So I just adore the possibilities you can do with this creature there and completely make it feel alive in the strangest sense possible, which I think that's why how unpredictable it is, even all these years later, after hundreds of hours on the game, when I boot it up and play any mission with the creature, when it just sneaks up on me, my heart keeps on racing every time. So uh, it makes an adrenaline junkie out of you. So- and I've gone on the horror bandwagon and I can't go off since that. So thanks for Isolation for that.
I think they also added two difficulties after the game's release. They added novice, so one
Yeah.
easier than easy, and they added nightmare, which, if I'm not mistaken, nightmare is just hard with the flickering motion tracker, or are there some other differences as well? Maybe with the saves, or
Yeah, there's other things modifying the AI as well, which makes it just a bit more intense, and like the leashes that it can go off are a bit shorter, and it's going to be a bit more on top of you all the time. It's slightly more relentless. It's closer to what people have modded in to try and make it harder, but it's not quite as insane as some of the some of the mods have gone. But yeah, it's still definitely a lot more relentless than the normal hard
Hmm.
mode.
Yeah, I've only been through nightmare once. I died a lot. Aaron, you need to do it. You need to get on my level and beat it already.
And look, I've done it on hard. That's okay. No, I do intend to at some point. And it's also worth mentioning, since Greg brought him up, but Eric is well known not to like this game and our little community because there's a whole thing about power play, power fantasy when it comes to playing video games. And Eric very much leans in that aspect of he wants to be empowered when he plays a video game. He doesn't want to be a victim. That is something I love about this game. I love being the underdog. I love the alien being a genuine threat. I love the fact that I don't fucking spray down 20 something aliens in a level. It feels more in line with the game, with the franchise and with the universe to me. So that's why I like being the victim in this.
You do still get the flip in Mission 10 though. When you get the flamethrower, it does feel a bit like you've started like flipped the tables a little bit. You've got slightly the upper
Mhm.
hand on it, but you're still definitely very much the
Well,
second in
especially
the
if
gun.
if you overuse it as well, because Stompy learns, oh, this won't actually kill me. I'm just going to barrel through this bullshit. But which speaks to
Yeah.
what Sizzy was sort of talking about earlier. The alien learning more as it goes along. That's why I always try and avoid the flamethrower. Don't work. I always end up using it a lot more than I intend to. But the choice is there if I was a better gamer.
On Nightmare, though, the flamethrower very realistically just goes out in a few seconds. The fuel consumption is ridiculous. I mean, it's actually in a lot more realistic sense than any of the movies ever portray it. Aaron, when you play it on Nightmare, the avoidance to use the flamethrower will come in handy because you'll have 1 to 2 bursts with your default starting amount, and that's it. So I love the variety that this game lets you uh, play with to make it so that uh, you can have the tailored experience that you want with the creature. For masochists like Aaron and me, there we can create something there to really put the pain on us. But for somebody that wants a different, more casual experience, uh, people who have played a novice, they also uh, really often say that they were afraid. They really felt it intense, but it was something that was more tailored for them. They liked it that they can maneuver out of the way easier, or just seeing the alien less with the amount of appearances. And
Well, the
uh,
atmosphere is still there with Novice. It's just the alien not being on you and on top of you as much. But the alien is only one part of the immersion. of the tension of the atmosphere of this game. You know, so much of it's there through this art design, through the level design, through the moments of you know, the fog and the lighting, the dynamic lighting in it, and the sound design. I always come back to the sound design. There's a reason this game won BAFTAs, but just you know, like the echoing of the alien in the vents, it just does wonders. And
Him thumping around too. That was, I mean, it cracked me up because it's just like, what are you doing up there? Stop. But it was like, sometimes he just wouldn't drop down. Like, it was just almost like, you know, just to make you uncomfortable. I don't know. Like, I kind of wonder if there were just some parts where it's just, you're supposed to just hear him thumping around just to keep you on edge, but he wouldn't like come down, probably unless you made a lot of noise. But I thought that was like very well done. I kind of like prefer that than actively being pursued. Is just kind of like the kind of like thing that Silent Hill does, is just kind of like, it'll just make you really uncomfortable, like, and you'll just constantly be uncomfortable, but there's not going to be something jumping out at you. It's just like you're constantly like, ah, like, and then all of a sudden you're at the end of the level and you're like, oh, okay. But did its job.
Yeah, some of the
I
vent
ag-
noises are fakes. They're put in just to sort of throw you off on edge. There's like
Oh,
certain
thank
bits
you.
that,
Thank you
yeah,
for saying that.
a lot of them aren't. But yeah, there's a few where they put them in, and it's clearly like just an awkward moment where they like just want to keep you on edge and be like, no, you're not really safe here.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for confirming me that. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I really liked it, but it was always like, it's like, oh, we're fine.
I think other than the incredible sort of environmental sound design, the score is just amazing, and the amount of parameters they have in the game for sort of what's going on in the gameplay to sort of tweak the score to what's happening, I think it's incredible. Like every track has 3 layers to it, and then what is happening in the gameplay, they sort of fade between these different layers, and so there's different sort of intensities as to what's happening. So like suddenly you can come into an encounter with an alien, and just seamlessly you're in this sort of really intense action piece of music, and then it'll all sort of fade out, and they have these ways of pulling environmental sounds out as well. So like suddenly if you're in an encounter with the alien, like all of the sounds in the environment will go and you'll just hear the footsteps and all these sorts of things, and they just come together to create this, like it, like I say, so movie like it, and the fact that it all happens runtime and just dynamically with what's happening, I think is incredible, and it's just always flawless, and I've never played it and it seemed like it's like out of place. It's always just been a great experience, and I think that's amazing.
yeah, I remember when they showed me that the visual representation of that when I went on the studio tour, showed me the sound engine working, and I was like, Jesus Christ, that's fantastic. And it's like you say, Matt, you know, I've never once had a playthrough of the game where I hear the sound engine fucking up, you know, with some awkward mix or some awkward, um, you know, fading and muting and whatever. And it's one of those elements that you don't really notice either, you know, because it's just so seamlessly done. Where yes, you might have all this heart pounding sort of music and sound and stuff, and then the stomp is close to you and it changes the focus, and then it's just your Amanda's breathing and stomp his footsteps, and it's just something that happens and affects you, but I'm not consciously aware of, and I love that kind of psychological thing that the game does.
Yeah, I think always with audio people, their best sort of commendation is that they don't get mentioned because it's just so good that you don't notice it there. Like you notice when something's wrong, but if it's perfect and everything is just going great, then you don't notice it, which is kind of a discredit to their work, really. But I mean, it's like yeah, you know something's going right when you don't notice it, which is an odd thing. But yeah.
I feel like that's very important for just survival horror games in general, is like how important music and sound design is, because that can just like make or break it. And like Matt said, it's just kind of like, yeah, the audio people, like, we got to give them props, because it's like, you know, Stompy in the vents, or just like telling the difference between the normal working Joes and like the heavy ones. Their voices are different. Like the heavy ones kind of are more deeper and crackly, so you can kind of like get that like, oh, I saw red eyes in the distance. Oh no, it's one of the heavy ones. Or just like the lack of sound is also, you need to kind of like know when to do that too, because that can even make you like, what's going on, you know? Or like is like, is this music or background noise? Sometimes it's the same, and it's like I feel like that really just puts you in the right headspace too.
And I think it's also worth noting, and it speaks to the legacy of the game as well, but specifically the sounds, how much of a use like Audible got out of everything that Isolation did. The amount of sound effects that the Audibles take wholesale from this game. That's a credit to the work that went into the Foley, went into the sound design of everything. And just so many aspects of Isolation had just sort of found their ways into all these different parts of the franchise going forwards.
Yeah, someone had ripped the full file packs for the sound and posted them to Reddit, and I remember going through them, and I was just overwhelmed by just the sheer amount of sounds that were in there. And I'm like, how did these guys like put everything here in the right place to interact with each other so it sounded right? It just seems like such intense work with that. And the game won a BAFTA award for sound design. It was nominated for other things, but it won for sound design. And I think the developers, I think they hold the BAFTA awards in kind of the highest esteem. Maybe we as gamers know the game awards a bit more for the announcements and the fanfare and stuff, but the BAFTA is I think the real like Oscars of game development. So it was cool for them to win for that very strong aspect, and for us to finally get the soundtrack, which they had to I think tweak a bit to work more in an OST format. But that was finally released after 10 years, and we don't really get that with video games. We're still waiting for soundtracks for some of the other games in the franchises. So to get that on streaming, on vinyl, on cassette.
How fucking random. No, don't get me
Who's
wrong.
getting the cassette? Yeah,
No,
not me.
I've ordered one, but
Me too.
I appreciate the thematic elements of them choosing to release it on a fucking cassette. Retro futurism. What did they call it? Lo-fi sci-fi, I think was the terminology that Creative Assembly used. And when I saw the announcement of the cassette, I was like, this is fucking stupid, but it's also fucking awesome, and I'm buying one of these. And I guess I also need to buy a record player now, because that's the only way you actually get
Yeah,
fucking physical releases now.
you will not regret it. Yeah.
Greg, is the resident sound guy, the resident musician, what did you think of Isolation's sound effects and sound engine?
Well, there'll be some interesting opinions you'll hear here. But well, first of all, I adore the soundtrack. That that is a given. The quality with it is fantastic. As said, the amount of layers that are done there, and with the seamlessness of blending the sound design aspect with the compositional, the music tracks there. The seamlessness of it is fantastic, and it serves a great what I especially love about the soundtrack is how it serves the gameplay purposes, with hinting at what's coming, what scene is developing there. But unlike maybe other horror games and action games as well, the soundtracks can be more in your face, and here the subtlety uh, really emphasizes the horror aspect, while at the same time completely being in the atmosphere of the Alien movies, combining the ambience with the prominent themes we have from the first Alien is quite a task, and the way it's done is perfect. And I also really do like the final, more heart pumping sequences, the final tracks when the trams are going, and the last scenes of Stompy in that long corridor. Those strings there are perfect. But uh, since uh, uh, since I'm a musician by trade, it's kind of hard for me not to notice a soundtrack anytime in any game. And however much I love it, then I do focus on that sometimes too much, and don't focus on the rest of the game. And once I saw a post somewhere where they said, try turning off the soundtrack and just leaving the ambient sounds. And I was like, okay, let's see how that would work. And when I did that, it really let me appreciate the unbelievable amount of faithfulness to making an industrial space station sound alive and harrowing. I didn't notice before I turned off the soundtrack, that when you're trying to hide from the alien or something, sometimes before you even see the alien, the soundtrack will start cueing that it's near, it's coming, which is great to help you in a gameplay sense. But when you're a masochist like I am and want the hardest possible experience, it's kind of a crutch that maybe I don't want to deal with. I want to be surprised and even have more of that randomness. And now that I now usually play it without the soundtrack turned on. I listen to the soundtrack separately because I love it so much. But uh, I am so in love with the sound design aspect. I want that to fully immerse me there, and to not so suggestively tell me what's going to happen here and there with such a dynamic and random AI such as the aliens. So I usually prefer Alien Isolation without the soundtrack there. And my favorite sound elements, not counting the environmental ones, which the highlights especially are the jutting flames. Whenever that suddenly happens, the metal pipe you can hear through that bursting fire is just beautiful, hard to describe for me. But from the alien side, from a canonical aspect, yeah, I do have always some pet peeves, and I'm pretty vocal about complaining about the too loud, too bassy footsteps, and that the screech is a bit too big, squealy, etc. But aside from how the alien was represented before, from just if we look at it as a unique character devoid of the rest of the franchise, the sound design is harrowing. Those footsteps will make you paranoid as hell. But my favorite sounds of the alien aren't actually the big loud ones, not even the vent hissing, which is perfect how close it is to a pipe. Yet when you learn to distinguish it, it does help in being able to notice when the alien is near the vent and when it's not. But it's so close that it takes a second to notice. But my absolute favorite sound from the alien is the texture you can hear when the creature is moving. Just the way you know this is a computer generated image, but it almost sounds like the creature is in a rubber suit. The way the tail snags along the ground, the way when it's moving its limbs, all those uh, disgusting organic sounds, those are my absolute favorites. So just hearing that subtly when the footsteps get quieter, when the creature isn't moving or just looking around, and you just see those. When, for instance, we normally move in films, we hear the rustle of clothes and anything, but for this, you hear the strange rustliness of the moist creature, the strange skin. It's absolutely harrowing for me, honestly.
His like kind of like carapace like rubbing against each other kind of noises.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, the sliding of the tail is brilliant. And yeah, on the note of the environmental sounds as well, obviously, it's like famously they were given the multiple terabytes of stuff from Fox, and I think it's really interesting because obviously Blade Runner, a lot of the sound effects came from Alien, and it's really interesting the fact that like you notice because I rewatched Blade Runner recently, and there's so many sounds that literally are just in the environment of Alien Isolation because obviously they're literally the same samples of sounds, and I think it's really cool the fact that they've had this sort of second life, well, third life if you include Blade Runner and Alien, this sort of extra life of being in the game and now being such this dynamic thing that you can sort of experience yourself. I think it's really neat.
Let's talk Stompy then as well, because
Yeah. Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For our audio listeners, Sizzy is very enthusiastically sharing a NECA Alien Isolation figure.
He's actually been standing this whole time, which I'm pretty impressed with.
Yeah, they have better legs, yeah.
NECA's QC.
Yeah, like short story is the stand he came with was useless because it was too small. and he fell down. And so I bought like a dynamic stand for him, also made by NECA, and that broke. And his legs are all warped now. I think they've gotten a little better. I did some fixing of them, but he still he does the hula alien, which they're known for. But overall, he's a nice guy. I'm glad to have something. And I guess he even has his little long little ragdolly tail too.
So I think, was this the first time we really got more of a Giga-esque alien in a game for donkeys, wasn't it?
I mean, we've seen even in Colonial Marines, I think the drones had a pretty biomechanical design, but yeah, and AVP 2010 as well. I'd say they maintain the Cameron look a bit, but yeah, this definitely was the most big chap feeling, because even if you had the aesthetic in Colonial Marines, they moved around like like the aliens.
Oh, the lurkers! I forgot. Yeah, I forgot all about that.
But yeah, this felt like big chap, and it felt like that in a way that we hadn't seen really in games before. It was an interesting choice to have the prominent digigrade legs, the most prominent. I mean, we first saw that in Alien Resurrection, really, but they never really showed the Xenomorph legs too much, even in the early films, because I think if you saw too much of the full body stuff, and this has been talked about, it would give away that it was a man in a suit more. And I know that was part of the reasoning when we talked to some of the developers who worked on the game just yesterday, Aaron. We recorded that. They were saying as much as that they tried both looks for the alien, and if you look at the concept art, you can see one that has the more legs in line with the film that are not so prominently digigrade. But it did feel too much like a man in a suit when you saw it. And when I first saw some of the early screenshots of the game, it's one of the things that kind of impressed me the most was just how massive the alien was and how big its
Crouching to
legs
come
were.
through those
Yeah,
doors.
exactly. The one shot of it coming through that door in Project KG-348, where it has to duck down to move through that. And I feel like in a lot of video games that the Xenomorph has felt smaller than the player, like crawling on the ground. You don't get the sense that they are as big as lumbering as they're supposed to be portrayed in the
That's
film.
all part of that power fantasy that we were talking about earlier. You know, it coming at you is a psychological thing. When it's coming at you from above, it's more threatening compared to, below eye level. And I think it was a genius move to emphasize that height more in this game than we're seeing in any of the other ones, really. I mean, I suppose 2010 did it a little bit with the campaign Praetorians. Those things were fucking giant. But it's more constant in isolation, and it's a good psychological tool.
Yeah, I think what worked there especially is the comparison to the last game at the time. In Colonial Marines, they felt the smallest they've ever been in that sense. I don't know if physically they are, but something with how the camera is positioned there and with their slenderiness and funny behavior, the creatures seemed small, as we've said a bit, and then to have it compared to this in Alien Isolation, where I think the standard alien domed head has been the biggest it's ever been, was quite the contrast and quite something that was imposing. So I think that factor was maybe then helpful for Alien Isolation because it was compared to the last segment, and it seems completely different when it's up in your face and with that size. I I completely like creating the alien to be bigger in that sense. I don't think they need to be any bigger than Stompy was there, but yeah, sometimes even in the films, depending if it's a stuntman or etc., they can seem a bit smallish in some angles. So I like that. We've had a game where the implied size of some of the shots in the films is shown more completely. And also, I'm always a fan of the digigrade legs, so uh, I'm on team digigrade legs. They look more elegant. They help the creature not look so much like a man in the suit. It helps things look more natural when moving and running and jumping.
When I went to Creative Assembly, back then the legs were a bit of a controversy, because it's not Big Chap. That's not the way Big Chap looks. That's not his legs. So it was something they were very aware of at the time. And when I went down there with Deshande, we got shown the animation, one of the animation stations, and they pulled up Stompy, and they had him accelerating, like really fucking just legging through it, and then pulling like a really fast turn, and it just works so well with the way the legs were built and positioned, and it all looks so fluid and natural. Obviously, you don't see Stompy going at like 30 miles a fucking hour in the game, although there are some animations of him, barreling down the corridor at you, but nothing quite like that. But it just looked so good, and I was like, yeah, I'm fine with digigrade legs. It's never one of the aspects of the design that bothered me, but seeing that in motion compared to everything I've ever seen in the films or the other games, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm on board.
Yeah, I think like aside from the sense of him just being huge and overpowering, like it's this interesting sort of dynamic that he's out of his sort of usual place. Like he's not supposed to be there. Like it seems like he's in the wrong environment, and like he is a sort of an outlier. Like the whole station seems so lived in, and then you've got this weird sort of alien creature that's like literally ducking down to get through the corridors because it's just so sort of overcumbering and like just so much bigger than you and so much bigger than the environment. Like I think it's a great detail.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Sizzy deserves credit for starting the whole Stompy nickname that took hold. I think you were watching me play the game, and a few days after it came out, you posted a little sketch calling him Stompy.
Something like that. I
Which
don't
is
remember. I nickname everything, so it's
Hey,
like
there's nothing wrong with that. But that's also another thing that was a little controversial, was his auditory portrayal, because obviously the point of the
he's a
point of
good
Big Chap,
predator being so noisy, huh?
yeah, it's like, I get the complaint. Obviously, Big Chap's silent. Predators will want to be silent, but it's a concession for gameplay purposes, because this is a game where you do not want to see that fucking alien. When you see that alien, that means bad shit is happening for you. It's either you're awkwardly now having to make your way around the map, or you're about to fucking get your face smashed in. And it's just one of those such logical, like, I fully understand why this is in there. I understand why they've gone this approach. And yes, that is another thing that gives me a physical reaction, is hearing those foot steps, foot stomps, sorry, should I say. But it works. It's one of those, I mean, I'm a fan. I nitpick shit, but it's one of those fan nitpicks where I'm like, "Oh, just shut up. It's for the game, and it's for the purposes of the game here, and it works."
It's a way you can auditorily tell like just how close the alien is getting to you, and I do feel like for most players, yeah, it works well in that regard.
The sound design of the footsteps is immaculate, but as a fan, I am so nitpicky about them. I understand gameplay wise why they're there, but on the other hand, I do believe that the same effect could have been done with different types of footsteps. It could have been more metallic with the claws clanging on the hard surfaces. We did not need the meaty bass thud there so much. And again, the creature has all of that slimy movement that you can hear, which can be the auditory cue that the creature is extremely close. I believe that it could have worked without it. And yeah, also the creature has constantly the little hisses and everything that the creature had in the previous films. So that could have worked as well as a hint that the creature is coming near without seeing it. So I really believe that game decision wise, it could have been done differently. I would have been perfectly happy if the game came with a slider for footsteps, that how loud you want them to be. Funnily enough, Aliens Fireteam Elite has footsteps. No, it's a slider to change around, which is kind of interesting. Like, okay, I like that that game has that. If they would decide to go with a loud, stompy alien for Alien Isolation 2, I just hope that they put a footstep slider, please. If they have that, then you can make your silent assassins there as well, and that would be great for us hardcore nitpickers. So
Footstep
just
slider. I
thank you.
can't say I've heard that implemented in a game before, but yeah, it would be interesting to see if they do give you more options to customize your experience. I mean, that hasn't typically been as much of a thing in horror gaming. I know Silent Hill 2 remake has done that recently. If you look at the gameplay options, there's a lot of different options for how you experience the game. You can tweak the puzzles and the combat difficulty independently. I know this is a crazy idea of mine that I would love to see for a
You
remaster
could
of
do
the
that in the
sequel.
original Silent Hill 2. You could,
Oh, okay.
yeah, you could change those.
I think they also have like newer accessibility options for the remake as well. So maybe this would be under that. But um, I would like an option to swap out the xenomorph model and have a bunch of different xenomorphs. So it's like maybe you want the resurrection alien pursuing you this time, and the next time you want the one from Romulus pursuing you. And I know some people will be like, oh, you just they're going to charge us DLC skins for the alien in our single player game with
Wait,
that.
no,
But
cut that out.
it would be cool to see. I mean, that the idea of having the option of what kind of alien do you want pursuing you today? I think it would add kind of a replay factor in maybe the sequel. Or is that a bad idea, Aaron?
They'd probably have to remodel it. It probably would be a bit more complicated than sliders for AI senses and sound. But if they were crazy enough to do something like that, I know I'm probably part of the problem there, but I would buy that in a
I would
heartbeat.
too. I would as well. I'm sure that would be work that they would not want to put into it, but it seems like no-brainer
Well,
cosmetic content.
it was interesting because in that original demo video that was kind of pitching
Because
the
it's
game,
ADI
showing
alien.
the first person perspective of like the medical bay in this very Nostromo looking hallway, the alien that drops down at the end is a Studio ADI looking alien. It
Mhm.
looks like one from Resurrection, so that was modeled at one point and used in the game. So
I kind of feel like maybe that's them going, oh shit, let's just drag that from that game or this commercially
I
available.
have never seen that model in another game. I don't know where it came from. I think they had to have created it. We should have asked that, but
Maybe it was just a 3D model placeholder from some site and just rigged an animation. I mean, just spitballing here, but uh, yeah, I agree with Adam that I don't think that exact model was used anywhere else before. But at the same time, I can't imagine it being anything else than just a slap together demo.
So we've talked a lot about the dynamicness of the alien as well, though. But I need to bring up the scripted moments because they also hit home really well. Like that initial moment when he comes down the vent when you're in that storage area, to the twirly reveals in San Cristobal. Like that shit's fucking mesmerizing. Like that is the best that I think, or one of the best that I think the alien has ever looked, is when it comes down the vent in San Cristobal. And I want to see that motion show up in an alien film. That's the fucking Easter egg I want in Romulus 2 or Alien Remus, whatever we call the next one. But give me that kind of stuff. So even though the scripted moments are few, they do hit home very well.
Yeah, there's a really neat sequence where the alien is climbing up on the side of the space station when you're out doing a spacewalk, and then you go back inside and it comes through, and then everything starts depressurizing. And I think that's a really neat one. It's like the alien is actually like tearing the station apart as it's coming back through. And then there's another one as well where you're in the corporate penthouses towards the end of the game, and it's this horrendous sequence. So you got to keep going there, back round, and then there, and then back round, and there, and back round. And as you come back round again, the alien like jumps over these boxes that you can't get over, and he like just scuttles around and hits into the wall and comes up and does this big thing in front of you. And that animation as well, I think is it's brilliant.
Yeah,
My
definitely.
favorite scripted moments are uh, well, yeah, scripted for the alien probably, but at the very end of the game where Amanda is untethering the Torrens with that self-destruct looking mechanism, uh, and the aliens start one by one climbing outside in space on those cranes.
Yeah.
The first time, of course, I didn't see them and notice them at all, but when watching for Easter egg videos and people pointing it out, I was like, no, it's possible that I would have seen it. And then when you see how in the shadows, one by one, a good number of them climb there, and it's so creepy. I adored that, but I also adored the more scripted cinematic type thing when you're exploding the reactor and the blue light happens, mini explosion, whatever, and then Amanda comes close and sees a little tiny texture there climbing over the railing. Oh no! And then the big alien on the window comes out with that little jump scare there, and everybody climbing up. I just loved seeing them climb all over the station. It looked so good.
They animated the alien just so well in this. It's every aspect of the game just comes together incredibly well, and that's another psychological moment as well. You know, when you get in the hive for the first time, when the aliens all come up around the reactors, and it's like, oh fuck, I hope I don't have to deal with too many of these now going forwards. And thankfully, the game only ever pits two at you at once, if I remember rightly, by default.
Uh,
Yeah, I think
if you use Matt's
That's why
options
I'd
there,
say by default.
yeah.
I think by default there's 3 in one point, maybe. The 2 is definitely sort of the average when it gets into the later bits. But yeah, the animations are incredible. Like Simon Ridge was the main animator guy, and from what I understand, he hand keyed all of the animations based on like these reference videos that he shot of himself doing like sort of alien poses, which I think is incredible. The fact that there's so much variety in all of the sort of things it does, and they're all just handmade is remarkable.
It just speaks to that sort of passion and love that went into it from the developers. And you know, that is a feeling that you get throughout the entire thing, is just care and passion. This isn't lazily slapped together. This is something that's been put together with a lot of attention to detail and a lot of desire to be as good as it can be. It doesn't, you know, it feels like a AAA title. It feels deserving of what I imagine to have been a fairly sizable budget, and it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like a crappy tie-in.
It feels like a very well-funded fan project, which I think is a great thing. Like, like you say, it feels like it's had a lot of love put into it, which I think speaks to how it's held up with time. Like, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm pretty impressed by how he can just like navigate like the corridors and stuff like that because he's so big. And I'm sure I've seen some like free cam like cutscenes where he is like clipping through stuff, but that's just kind of like the nature of animation. But I'm just like, whoa, like, and I think that's like the foldability of his like digigrade legs. Like he can really like squat down like pretty tight if you like need him to, and his little like stovepipes too will go forward. So it's like really interesting just from like a design standpoint. You know, he does definitely move like this kind of like slow, methodical like predator, which I thought was great, especially because he does like those chuffing sounds, which are like tiger like chuffing. And I was like, oh, well, that's like a happy noise that tigers make. So it's kind of funny that hearing an alien do this like sound, which is like, oh, here he comes, you know?
I think the fact that he moves slowly and methodically around the environment makes it all the more kind of startling when you just see how fast he can move at those moments where he has bursts of full speed when you throw a distraction or when he does spot you. And if you manage to get away, just the sense of he's able to move so much faster than he is most of the time.
The
Exactly. And
noisemakers getting him. So funny. He gets like do 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 like he's just like, what is that? It's like scary, like how fast he can move. Like I said, he's just like this very like methodical predator, and then also he hears something, whether it's like one of the like looter people, the bad people, and it's like he hears them and he's suddenly like shoo, like it's like, you know, he just like tuckers down and just goes for it, and it's like, oh man, like you're screwed. Like he's like just like a total like killing machine.
I was extremely impressed with the animation of Big Chap, well, Stompy actually, uh, in the vents. I've never imagined that it can look. It looks so horrifying. It looks a bit clumsy in a realistic way. How would such a giant creature climb through that? But at the same time, it's so menacing that the most horrifying moments I've ever had with the game is whenever that damn creature finds a way to get into the vents while I'm still in them. The fear that you're trying to get away as fast as you can. Do you have enough ammo to stop it? Because it's very hard to stop him in the vents. And then if you get out, then just hearing it slither out of the vent and knowing that it's seeing you and it's gonna get you. Uh, those tight spaces with a creature have burned into my psyche how well and terrifying that looks.
At the
There
same
is
time, I do feel it's a little funny when you blast him with a flamethrower in the vent and he can only move so fast in the vent, so he kind of has to slowly turn around and go away slowly.
He like shuffles away. He's like, ooh, 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 ooh. No, pat, 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 pat.
Yeah, there is a bug that can happen when he comes out of the vent. Sometimes he doesn't go back into his full standing mode, and that is the creepiest thing I've ever seen. Like, there's videos of it online. You can see he's like scuttling around on the floor in his vent pose, and he's just in this little crouch position. It looks horrendous.
He
In
looks
a
like
good,
a little
like
remote
horrendous.
control, like little toy, because he's just like, like almost.
Terrifying.
So Sizzy mentioned what did you call them, looters? I think that's the game's weakest link is the interaction with the human stuff. I mean, from again the world building point of view, all the logs and all the backstory that we get for a lot of them are interesting and great. But when it comes to actually dealing with the human characters, it is the game at its least interesting. I feel like there perhaps could have been a bit more dynamicness at play there. You could try and talk to and coerce and negotiate with them rather than it's either these ones don't seem to mind me or these ones are just going to shoot me.
Yeah, I got the impression from some of the early developer videos that if you didn't aim your gun at a lot of them, that they wouldn't open fire on you. But it seems some are just proximity based. If you get too close to them, they'll open fire. But it always seemed like they would just open fire anyway. When I
Same
played,
experience I had. Yeah.
I do feel like it's an interesting aspect of the game because it adds that third combat dynamic and enemy compared to the alien and the working Joes. And like the working Joes, they're not always an enemy. Sometimes they're just there. But there aren't really any moments where they're actively helping you. They are either just there or they are something to deal with. And so yeah, I do feel like again hopes for the sequel that if we are dealing with other humans in the environment that it would have a bit more dynamic
Complexity to
elements.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. If of anything for them to take forward for the next one, it is please just make the human interactions a bit more interesting, or maybe even obvious. Sometimes I played one mission, I can't remember which one it is, where there was a bunch in the it's before it's before the Gemini stuff when you're back in the Systech lobby. And there's a bunch of humans there, and I can never remember if they're friendly or not because I'm fairly sure that's the first time you go in there. You walk up the stairs, somebody just takes a fucking shot at you. Um, um, I remember I'm trying to crawl around. Oh, I hope they don't see me. And then Amanda's just got this dialogue with them. It's like, oh, the creature's near here. And they're like, oh, thanks. Okay, we're going to leg it then. And I'm like, oh, I've just done, I must have looked like a fucking twat. You know, in universe, they just see this
Crawling
fucking
around.
woman crawling around.
And they're like, hey.
But no, just
Under the table.
just some more depth to it in the sequel would be nice to the human interactions.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, Sevastopol is this sort of station full of all these interesting stories, which you discover in all the audio logs, and then you go up to the people, and there's no depth to them at all, which is quite odd. Like, it would be really nice if you could go up to people and they would sort of tell you what's been happening with them. And there is a moment, I think, in Mission 10 where you can go up to one of the random NPCs and they'll give you a locker code, and you can go into a locker that they give you, and that's the only instance of that happening in the game, which is really, yeah, quite strange. That I don't know why there's not more of that sort of thing. And like you say, the fact of being able to walk up to enemies or friends and not knowing whether they're friends or enemies unless you sort of crouch around and listen to what they're saying and then get the vibe of, oh yeah, they're friendly. Like, you surely know that they're like, if you're meant to be going up and talking to them, like yeah, it seems like it's a bit of it's definitely the thing that's aged the game the most, I think, when you replay it.
I think it could have been like maybe they just couldn't decide what they wanted to do because I feel like a lot of stuff like you just get from like the terminals and whatnot. So it's like I feel like it's like, well, if you have too many good NPCs, then you're just getting a lot of information from NPCs, and then you're also getting a lot of information from like terminals. So maybe it would have caused like a balance thing where it's like you're talking too much to different things, and it's like I feel like the terminals do a good job of just kind of like telling you, oh, this is what happened, but at the same time, it's like it would have been more interesting if it was like I like that part that you mentioned where you're like, hey guys, the alien, you got to get out of here. And I think there's like 3 or 4 people in that big like foyer area where you can be like, aliens coming, get out of here, and they're like, oh, like that would have been neat. Or even if it was just like at the beginning when you see like Axel a couple times just like running by, I kind of would have enjoyed more like non-hostile like people just kind of like being almost kind of rat-like and like seeing you and running away because they don't know if you're bad either. And it's like I'm this chick with a flamethrower and a shotgun and a pistol, and like they're probably like, oh crap, get out of here. So would have been interesting, or just like maybe the alien getting them. I don't know.
One funny thing, there's only one instance of a toilet on Sevastopol, and that is where those people go when you tell them to hide from the alien. They walk into where, where the toilet is in the little alcove, and then the door immediately locks and you can't go in there. But I think there's a funny little world thing, the fact that there's no sort of amenities on Sevastopol. There's plenty of showers around for some reason, but there's not any toilets. I don't know where that is.
Well, a shower is a toilet in some circumstances.
What was that meme that said like it was silent? All the bathrooms are in Silent Hill for some reason. Like they took them all out of Alien Isolation and put them in Silent Hill.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, really?
You're gonna have to find that and send that over to me.
Oh no! I'm like, has anyone else played Silent Hill games? I'm like, oh no.
Right, well, we've actually hit all my notes that I've got. Is there anything anybody wanted to talk about that we haven't?
I want to bring up the I think an important part of the game is just having that original cast back from Alien, not only in the Nostromo logs you find in the game, but in those 2 story-based DLCs that take us through some of the events. And in the first one, maybe a different version of the events of the original film. As much maligned as Colonial Marines is, the one thing I do like about it is it kind of feels like a sci-fi museum at times, where all these environments I've seen by watching this movie growing up, I can now explore a bit. And I feel like we got that with the Nostromo in terms of the 2 DLCs. I think one came out with the game, Crew Expendable, and the other was released a little bit later, Last Survivor. And Sigourney Weaver had not really participated in Alien video games before, letting her voice work. So to have not only her, but to have most of the original cast reprising their roles, it was just a real treat as an Alien fan, and it was a real icing on this cake that was Alien Isolation, and how well done those were. I think challenge mode is fine, and it's great to see new environments at the station, but like you were saying, Matt, there's all these different stories we hear of people surviving on the station. And I feel like they could have maybe been a bit more narrative driven, because these were characters we play as in the challenge mode that we're reading about through the logs, and we want to learn more about their experience. And so to have just this objective based, time based mode, I still think you could have had that maybe in some of the other challenge modes we got, like the Gauntlet stuff. But I do feel that was a bit of a missed opportunity there.
It's just so not what the rest of the game is. The rest of the game is taking your time and making wise decisions, and I think inherently a timed mode sort of makes you just want to fucking leg it and be quick and take all the risks that you wouldn't necessarily take in the main campaign. So in that regard, I don't really love the challenge modes, but it is nice to be able to play them as other characters. It is nice to see other areas of the station, but again, you can't really, unless you're using Matt's tools, you can't really enjoy that set design, that level design, as much as you can in the other one. in the main story, because I mean you get moments of respite in there, and you can go back and explore other places at certain points in the game. So you do have this chance to just go appreciate it without having to mod it. But yeah, you're right. The story DLC that they do have, the Crew Expendable and the Last Survivor is still great. Hearing those voices back in some circumstances noticeably older, you can hear it in their voice, but to also hear them say new bits of dialogue as well, and that moment where you're in the vents is fucking harrowing. I that is one of the moments I tend to play when I do visit the game in VR, and I think there's a video of me playing another mod, playing that moment in VR, and I just shit my pants. With Veronica Cartwright just going off in your ear and panicking, and no, not that way, the other way. It's just fucking brilliant, and just such an atmospheric moment of the game, and I'm glad that happened. I do agree with you. I think they missed a treat not having more strongly narrative driven extras, and again, I hope that's something they take forward with the sequel.
I do also wonder how constrained they were in terms of budget with Sega. And again, this is just me speculating, but we had the canceled Obsidian game, Aliens Crucible. Colonial Marines severely underperformed and was critically maligned. So I do wonder if perhaps that
2010 as well, that was rushed out kind of as a recoup, and they had a third DLC that was planned that Sega told them not to bother with.
Exactly. So I do wonder how much that budget was maybe tightened for Isolation. There's a particular moment of the game that's always had me curious, and that is the Anisadora section. We escape the station temporarily on this little ambulance that flies away from the station. And once we dock on the Anisadora, I was initially kind of confused because we dock in an ambulance docking bay that looks exactly like the one we just left on the station. And if you look at the wall, it actually still says San Cristobal Medical Facility. I was like, wait, what the hell? Like, we're on the other ship now. What's going on? And then when you go through the halls of the Anisadora, yes, it has a little bit of an aesthetic change to it, but
I would say more than a little bit. It's
to
very
an
obviously
extent,
not.
it does have these curved like metal bits. The coloration's a bit different, but you look at the Anisadora interiors in the art book, and they definitely felt way more distinct originally. And there were some odd bits where there's a bunch of like hospital beds and gurneys in the Anisadora, and I'm like, was this a medical ship that was turned into a salvage vessel or something like that? And oddly enough, I was looking through the art book today, and there was a medical ship called the Patna. I know that ship name is also used in Alien 3. And of course, we have Marlowe as a character in this game, and the Marlowe is a ship in AVP 2010. So
And the
those
character in Dark Descent.
yeah, so those Conrad references are used over and over again. But yeah, so I am curious about if maybe that section was a bit rushed and hobbled together because of the constraints and the realities of game development. I don't know for sure, obviously, but just seeing some of the Anisadora that we see in the art book, it did feel like there was a more distinct ship there we were originally maybe going to explore.
Yeah, so the Anisadora in the final game is actually a repurposed section. So it was originally the opening of the game was you would go to the ship that you go to as the Anisadora, and it was called the
The
Solace.
Solace.
Yeah, so previously it was the Patna, which was a medical ship, and then it got turned into the Solace, which is this sort of a ship that people had used to get away from Sevastopol. And they'd been sharing the hypersleep berths, which was where the medical gurney area is. And they'd been taking rotas to sort of to use the hypersleep chambers. And eventually something had gone wrong. From what I can gather from the cut stuff, there was like an alien that broke out on the ship and they've all died. And the story mission beat for beat was exactly the same. So like you power up the generator and you'd go through the ship and figure out, like, discover all of these dead bodies in the coffins, as they were called, which was the actual cryosleep chambers. And then the reason the ship broke apart, it didn't, obviously Marlowe overloads the reactor in the final game and it all explodes and you get this nice set sequence of everything exploding. Then in the original thing, you would go onto the ship, and because you've powered all the generators up, the whole ship was covered in ice. So it had this really nice aesthetic of everything being frozen, which I think is probably why most of the geometry is similar to the Sevastopol, because it had all this different art style applied to it. And you turn the generators back on, and the ship all starts thawing and breaking apart, and then you have to escape off the ship and get back to the Torrens. And yeah, it seems like the beat for beat is exactly the same as what ended up in the final game, and they just wanted you to get on Sevastopol slightly quicker, so they cut it out from the start, and obviously you just wake up and then you go straight to Sevastopol, which I think works better, as cool as that sequence was. But I think they were like, this sequence is so cool, we then have to use it for something else. Because originally you would find the Anesidora in the dry docks, which is an area that also got cut out of the game entirely. And you
And
go
there's
down to the
concept art for that as well in the book, if I
yeah,
remember
with power
rightly.
loaders in the dry docks, yeah, which is would have been interesting to see. But yeah, so you would have gone to the dry docks and found the Anesidora there, and then you go onto the Anesidora and they're like stripping it for parts and stuff. And then you actually end up crashing Sevastopol by destroying the gravity anchors at the bottom of Sevastopol. But then obviously this was reworked in the final game so that you go onto the Anesidora, which previously was Solace, and then you blow up the Anesidora, which is what ends up destabilizing the station. But yeah, it does feel like a bit of a tacked on part, literally, because it is a tacked on part. It's this sort of, when I was playing it with my friends originally, we were discussing it sort of day to day as we'd been playing through it. And my friend who was playing it, he was like, there's a section you'll get to where you literally go up, do something, and then have to go back through the whole thing again to come off the thing, and you'll know when you get there. And I played the Solace mission, sorry, the Nisidora mission, and I was like, yeah, this is the part he was talking about, because it's very much like you go on, you power up all the ship, and then all of a sudden you run back off again. The whole section just feels like it was kind of there to get you the audio log, and that's it. And it does feel a little bit redundant, and like you say, the art style does feel a bit repetitive in places. But you got the nice little engineering bit that you go to turn the generators on, which I think is a nice sort of new set piece. But yeah, it did definitely feels tacked on because it is tacked on. But it was this cool thing that they wanted to keep in, I think.
It is one of the most odd parts of the game for me, because you have the sequence where the ship is starting to overload. I guess not overload to the extent Marlowe was intending, but still, it's going to be destroyed and crash into the station and start the station's downfall towards the planet. But after you have this intense run with all these explosions and electricity shooting out back to the ambulance, you sit down in the little ambulance chair, and all the sound just kind of fades out. It just fades to black. There's no cutscene of you flying back to the station, and before you know it, you're just on the station, and Verlaine is on the radio like, "Oh, this ship crashed into the station." And I'm like, it definitely seems like some some corners may have been cut at this area.
Yeah, so the ambulance shuttles, because obviously the ambulance shuttles, they're meant to be inter-tower transit, so you would use them to get between the different towers of Sevastopol. And one of the cut missions was you would go into the medical area and find a key card and sort of discover all these artifacts from somebody, and then it would give you a code to be able to get into the transit towers, the transit card thing for flying between the different towers. And you would use the medical lifeboats to get between the towers, and then yeah, they just got repurposed for the sake of being able to get to the Anesidora, because they needed a way for you to get there, which is, like you say, why it's literally just says that you're still in San Cristobal when you get there, which is slightly confusing. There's also certain areas in Sevastopol where you like can see the Torrens logo on the wall, and it's like, well, we're not on the Torrens here. Why is this here?
It's interesting. I didn't know that you had the option of going from tower to tower with these little space flight ambulances. Not only the transit system, but to have this other element. And it's another thing I'm hopeful for with the second game. If there's another hub environment we're exploring, to have more options of getting from place to place. I don't know if I'd call Alien Isolation an open world game. I guess it kind of is, because you can pretty much explore, even though there's a narrative path to follow and it's pretty linear. You can backtrack and you can explore different parts of the station.
Well, you're encouraged to as well, as you get access to like the better torches, the higher level hacking tools. It's how you get, your extra, all your logs and your Nostromo logs and stuff like that. There's just a certain point in the game where it makes sense for you to start using the transit system to go to all these other places.
Yeah, there is an animatic that was done, like a sort of previs sequence, of you going in the sort of inter-tower transits and being able to fly between them, which is really neat to see. And there's like all these storyboards they did of it as well, which is really cool to look at, just to see how that would have played out, because it's this sort of cool, seamless transition you'd have got from going between one tower to the other and flying in and docking up at the other bit, which would have been really cool to see. But yeah, so I didn't get it.
I'll have to check that out. I haven't seen those before, but yeah, there is a lot of interesting cut content from the game. I know PC Gamer did an article about this whole intro sequence, which was about Waits trying to kind of quell the the unrest of the people on the station.
Xenopedia has a very extensive article on it, which was from stuff like that, Matt found in the files, in the unused scripts and stuff like that. And if that is something you're interested in, do go on Xenopedia and have a look at the Alien Isolation cut content. Very extensive. And speaking of Marlowe, I loved what the game did with the human villains, because Marlowe is very right in his panic and desire to not want to allow the aliens to get off of the station. And to some extent, Waits is quite right in his determination to kill the alien. It's very grey, very morally, I don't want to say ambiguous, but morally questionable, but in a way that it's not, oh, alien equal money, alien equal weapon. There is some of that in the game, you get that through Ransom wanting to have samples to try and get money from Weyland-Yutani. And obviously Weyland-Yutani buying Sevastopol to get hold of the alien samples, but they're more background elements. Waits and Marlowe are characters that you are interacting with within the narrative. You are getting prominent dialogue from them and with them. And I think it's just refreshing to have that sort of less not egomaniac, that less mad scientist aspect that a lot of the rest of the EU tends to play with. And it also just fits the theme of everybody trying to survive and have their own goals and agendas. The RPG session coming out there, but it just makes it feel so, perhaps not unique, but just fresh. Fresh in terms of all the stuff the rest of the alien lore tends to do. I mean, even Colonial Marines, before it was Michael Bishop wanting his samples, and before that you had Groves and the Bishop android. So it was just something different at the time, and I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, they're not explicitly evil characters, but both are in different ways very extreme in their methods. I think there's more of a case of Waits being a bit of a scumbag if you listen to some of the audio logs and how he was on the station with people and some of his methods. There's definitely a bit of corruption going on there, I think. But it is interesting the alien gets on the station. Waits says, "I should deny your request to dock. But if you have a find, we want a cut of that, and that's why I'm allowing you to dock on the station." So yeah, it all just comes down to space capitalism again. But yeah, and even a character who's the corporate character like Taylor, like she's even though we have the kind of sinister moment where she's trying to set up a deal so she can secure the alien, she's still concerned about Ripley and defending Ripley as a character. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of morally gray kind of situations in this. And even in the beginning of the game, where you have Axel kind of like stress to Ripley, like, we're in a survival situation. You don't understand, like, people are killing each other. You will maybe have to defend yourself. And she's still very taken aback, like, why are you so aggressive? And maybe just because of his survival situation, he's become overly aggressive, more so.
Take them out? What's what she said exactly. There's too many to take out, and she's like, take them out? like, oh God.
Yeah, the voice acting is phenomenal in this game. I'm really happy with how the voice actors presented it, and of course with the writing. As people said, the characters are very gray and they feel like real characters who are surviving a situation. everyone has their interesting peculiarities, interesting motivations that are not just one thing. There's always another layer to it. Even I remember with the audio logs, just hearing all of the different perspectives, and Sinclair, the head of the security force, who we fight here and there, about when we were first learning, he's grouping up his security guys and his personal little group there, and excluding others, and being, brutal in the sense, if we're going to survive, we can't be weak and we can't be soft on people. If you do this, you're in. If you do this, you're out, etc. And you first think, okay, he's brutal there, and then you get to the last audio logs and you find out that the security people have been rounding up all of the children. They are the ones who are safeguarding all of the remaining kids there, and that even Sinclair had his child and wife on the station that in the last stand didn't work out. And his last speech, when he just is telling off everybody on the station, the Colonial Marines, anybody who finds this later, you screwed up, you didn't come on time, we waited as much as we could, and it was all for nothing. I really loved the way you felt that this was a living place that really went down in quite a bad spot, and I was always kind of sad that we didn't get more tales of the survivors, more either what you guys said from the DLC missions having a bigger focus on the narrative, or even if not that, comics or novels, especially
Yeah,
with the Alien Isolation
I
novel. I
I
wanted it to be
really
that, the
I
fall,
really
not
want to see, like, if they do more Alien anthologies, I want to see one about a character from Sevastopol. There's still just like so many opportunities that could be mined from that entire situation, because it was over several months, wasn't it? It wasn't just
It
or at
was at
least,
least a month. It was at
yeah.
least a month, but it was some time, definitely, and a lot of characters. So much happens. There's so much to draw from in inspiration. There's so many characters, so many situations there. You really could create not one but multiple interesting, engaging stories from a survival aspect there. That so much untapped potential there.
There was one little tie-in comic that came out at the time, but yeah, I definitely feel
That
there's more potential there.
I don't see a lot of the relevance in that comic. I think what one of the logs references what happens with the Joe. Otherwise, I'm just like, this seems irrelevant to anything that's currently that goes on in the game.
I haven't read it for a long time, so I need to actually reread it. But yeah, I
I like
remember
it.
not feeling it was too
But yeah,
great, honestly.
and to be fair, I mean the same happened with the Colonial Marines tie-in as well. That was just this is irrelevant. It's not interesting to the game, but whatever.
But I would recommend, if you are interested in the very solid art and design of the game, the art book is still available. You can still go on Amazon. This is the limited edition. Natasha is holding up the standard edition. That's the one that's still available. If you look on Amazon, surprisingly, still there. So
Forbidden Planets always have them cheap over here in the UK. You can normally pick them up quite accessibly. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up, or should we wrap?
I got something. I got a couple notes. We were talking about weights, and I wrote down all the character names in my notes so I wouldn't forget if I had to bring something up. And I wrote down weights, asshole, Marshall. So I thought that was just funny because everybody was like, he's a jerk. And I was like, yeah, that's what I got too. I think I had a fun encounter with a working Joe and Stompy where the alien or Stompy was I threw a flare to distract Stompy so I could get by, but a working Joe came over and Stompy was hunched over the flare looking at it, and the working Joe had his arms crossed behind his back and he was looking down at it, and it was just a a funny visual how it's like I got both of them at once. And they were just so, it just was like they're so enamored with the flare. And I was just like, okay, and I just scooted on by behind them. It's
I love
pretty
the
amusing.
dialogue that you can get from the Joes when they encounter the alien. You know, the "What are you?" unidentified life form kind of stuff.
He's
I
like,
love those.
I have logged this. like,
Those little
thank
moments
you.
are really cool.
Oh yeah, when you I had a funny one with a non-hostile Joe, and I wish there were more of those. Honestly, if anything, just to like make you kind of second guess, like, oh, what's that? Oh no, that's fine. But he was like, you have lots of unauthorized weapons on your person, or something like that. Because it's like, yeah, I got a flamethrower, shotgun, a pistol, and all kinds of things. And I thought that was pretty amusing. I think I wrote. Oh, Adam had actually brought up after the first time you get the one time when you get rid of the first alien Stompy, and I finished that level, and Adam asked me, did you send Stompy to his new home? Which just cracked me up because you like send the whole facility to the planet. It's like, yeah, I think he died. I think he's gone. But it just cracked me up. Just like, oh, he went to his new home. He's fine. Like, you know, the dog that ran away. Oh no, he went to go live on a farm. He's fine. Don't worry
Space
about
farm.
it. Yeah, the hostile planet that he's just rotting on, probably.
It's burnt up in the atmosphere. No chance for him.
Yeah, I think the pressure's a bit strong on those gas giants.
Yeah. I think the last one I had was I was very excited with when you get out of that, like, what is it, like the power core, and you drop down and it's just the hive, and I was just like, ah, like I was like, let's go, we're back, baby, because I was like so tired of like the working Joes at that point, and I was like, oh, finally, just some aliens to deal with. So I was like, you know, like barking at the screen, just like, oh yes, 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 aliens, aliens. And I like it how they didn't go too crazy. Like, I don't know, I don't want to call it nostalgia baiting, but it was like they didn't go too crazy with the hive stuff. Like, you kind of just get that one like little part just to let you know, like, hey, things are bad, guys. Like, you know, and then at the very end, when it seems like they're trying to kind of make a hive, after they all escape again, but by then it's like too late, and you're gonna, you know, send them to their home, as it were.
Yeah, it was something I think some of the reviewers complained about was that part in the end where you're almost about to escape and Amanda gets snatched into the vents, and you're hived up, and then you have to go through another gauntlet after you just went through a gauntlet to get out.
Little torture porny for me. I was like, okay, but I did like the scene where the, you know, how they animate the animation when she's pulling out the suit, and like the whole game it just been like her looking at the helmet, and then like it fades to black. But like this last time there's like dripping on it, and I was like, oh, like I thought that was a really good bit. Like I was like, oh wow.
I know a lot of the reviews did say that it was overly long and there's too many endings and stuff, but I had such a good time with the game.
Oh yeah.
That I just didn't want it to end. So, you know, all these fake outs, I was like, okay, good, more game, more of this world. Keep me here. And I dug it, and that was, like I said earlier, Amanda is so fucking punished in this game. I actually genuinely thought she was gonna die during my original playthrough. I was like, right, they're actually gonna kill me off here. And I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, so one of the most interesting, I think, pieces of cut content I've come across is the fact that Amanda was originally pitched as an android. So this big reveal at the end of the game would be that Amanda was an android the entire time, and you've been playing as an android. And I think it speaks volumes that they changed that, because as we've been talking about today, like, she's such a great character and stands in her own right. I think it would have been a bizarre ending for them to be like, oh, you survived because you're an android. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was a very strange one.
It just goes straight up Austin Powers with that.
Well, it kind of gets to like that female war, the novelization of the female war, where Ripley, Ellen Ripley, and it's an android, and you get no reason as to why. and I don't feel like there'd be any logical reason as to why Amanda Ripley would need to be or should be an android in it. I'm glad that got changed.
Definitely, yeah.
My final thing I'd like to talk about or actually ask is directed towards Matt regarding extending the life of the game with all of the tools, but specifically uh, with the first thing that we previously thought was impossible. How did you get the ability to spawn multiple aliens in a map? How was that? What was that, a relatively easy process or was it difficult? Can you give us a short idea of how that process went through with you?
Yeah, so the game uses a custom scripting engine. So the engine is called Cathode, and then they built this sort of scripting system. So it's kind of similar to like Unreal Blueprint, where you make nodes and then drag between them to script logic. And it's this really cool system that they built with their own in-house tools for. And then sadly, obviously, they never released any mod tools. But yeah, I was just poking about in the files, and I figured out you could swap these IDs to sort of change entities to be aliens in the level, and that was how I did my aliens isolation mod originally. And then that led into like just sort of that was 5 years ago now, 5 years of reverse engineering the whole scripting format, and I've built this whole node-based editor now where you can sort of make entities and make whole custom scripts to sort of spawn NPCs, do literally everything they would have been able to do in their own tools. So yeah, I mean, it's not just adding aliens at this point. You can literally make your own missions and levels and stuff using these tools now. But yeah, that's how it's just reverse engineering the custom scripting format, which has been a great learning experience. It's been really cool to sort of pull it all apart and try and resolve the problems they were solving to build the tools again, which yeah, it's been great fun.
I had a question on that note. Since you said you could have so many aliens, do you need like to make a script extender type thing? Because it seems like that would be really taxing on the game to have like everything just be an alien, like running all that AI at once, or is it different?
Yeah, I mean, the game is obviously. I think you, like we said, you get 3 in gameplay at one point, and then obviously
Mhm.
there's more scripted ones. But yeah, the game seems to handle it pretty well. I mean, the aliens isolation mod I made all that time ago. I think there was 8 of them in there then, and they seem to be running all right. And I've tried it with quite a few, and they seem to do okay. If you get loads of them in one space, like especially with like facehuggers and stuff, they just sort of end up phasing through the floor. Which is, and there's if you spawn loads of working Joes at the same time, like sometimes they'll just sort of pop in and out of existence, and some of them will just start catching on fire, and then the environment will just go mental. And so it's clearly not designed to have that many things going on. But yeah, the game seems to handle it pretty well. It's a well-made game.
I remember Sizzy asked me if there was a Thomas the Tank Engine mod for the game because that's been seen in some other horror games like Resident Evil 2 remake, and I was like, oh yeah, and the guy that made it is gonna also be guesting on our podcast.
That fucking mod is nightmare fuel. Just Thomas in any fucking horror thing is just pure dread and evil.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I added the ability to change models in the game, and I was like, what have I got to do to do it? And of course, it's Thomas the Tank Engine. I mean, it's the go-to, and yeah,
I
it's
feel like
horrifying.
that's just as someone who does a lot of modding. I feel like there's always well, first of all, where's the nude mods? And then where's Thomas the Tank Engine, which is just the duality of modding, I guess. It's like, where's the nude ones? Where's the Thomas the Tank Engine? Where's the HD textures?
Yeah, it's great to see some of the stuff people are making with the tools. Some of the mods to increase the difficulty, like there's one called the Kitty Isolation mod, which literally makes the game impossible, and yet you get people speed running it and running through all these levels with tons of aliens running around and no weapons or resources. And how people do it, I don't know. Like they've got like Nika Hart running through it with this steering wheel and all this sort of stuff, and it's just it's great to see people messing about with it. I love it. It's really good.
My personal preference with the mods was using the ones that were pre-made a few years ago, seeing what parameters were in there, and trying to combine the aspects in the OpenCage editor. So my personal preference, which I hope I'll be able to one day stream for people to see, is using the unpredictable alien mod with the wider leash, making things a lot more unpredictable and a lot less encounters. But at the same time, the areas where you're safe, I eliminated them, so the alien can always come when I'm doing pre-made tasks, along with combining things from the insane mod with the extra super senses and putting that literally on steroids, giving it realistic human level or predator level vision and hearing, so it can see me from the whole side of the corridor, not be able to hide beneath anything. And it's a crazy experience that we're able to do things like that. So for us, crazy hardcore people who like very specific experiences, we are eternally grateful, and I cannot wait to see what people are able to create custom levels in the future because of your great hard work there.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's great seeing what people make of it. It's rewarding when people post mods and you see people enjoying it, and it's like, yes, the tools are they're paying off. Like, it's great. Yeah, love it.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for coming and joining us today to nerd out about Alien Isolation.
Yeah, it's been great.
Adam, do you want to pour us out?
Sure. Again, just to cap off, happy 10th anniversary to the game. It's just so good to finally have confirmation that a sequel's coming, and to see Sega recognize this classic of horror that they made again, and to have them celebrate that, and for us to be able to celebrate that with all of you out there listening or watching who have enjoyed the game or maybe haven't tried it yet. It's a great landmark for the game, and we are very curious to see what the team does next, and maybe if the game itself will get that remaster that's been rumored, and then we just have to play it all over again. But yeah, you can always find us on our website, avpgalaxy.net. We are also on all the major social channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters, as usual, for enabling us to spend the time doing what we do here at AVP Galaxy. We very much appreciate your support. If you'd like to follow me personally, you can find me at RidgeTop21 on both Twitter and Instagram. Aaron, how about you?
You can find me at _Corporal Hicks, just on Twitter.
Greg, is there anywhere people can follow you if you like?
Not particularly, but I'm still collating on Discord, Steam, AVP Galaxy. That's where I mostly hang out with the Alien and Predator fans.
And Matt, if people want to see more of your work?
Yeah, at Matt Fowler on Twitter. Plenty of mod videos and fun things going up there.
Sizzy, did you want to plug any socials?
I'm pretty much SizzyBubbles on everything. So if you want to look me up on a platform, just type it in. It's probably me. The same I everywhere.
But thank you again, everyone. Really enjoyed this chat. We will continue to celebrate isolation for the rest of the month, and we'll have more posts. I'm sure this podcast will probably go up after
This
month
podcast
is
will be
over,
out in November. I have episodes booked in for every single week this month that I've already done. When this goes up, if you haven't already listened, we should already have our interview with several of the developers who worked on Alien Isolation. That should be up first. If you're listening to this without having listened to that, go back, listen to that. That was really hard to get organized and get people involved with. So please go listen to it and appreciate it and enjoy it. And thank you again to those guys, to Andy and Will and Dion for joining us. But cool. This has been Corporal Hicks.
RidgeTop.
Still collating.
Matt Fowler.
And SizzyBubbles.
And ask me about AVP Galaxy's safety protocols. Okay. And end.